Hello, good evening everybody. Thank you for... Is that a bit loud? Thank you for coming along to today's meeting of the Planning Applications Committee. Just before I get onto the agenda, as I say, a warm welcome to everybody on a bit of a damp day. I just want to say, in regards to the items on the agenda, thank you to officers for taking on board the inclusion of the relevant parts of the local plan. I think that will certainly give members some extra guidance on their determinations. And it's quite timely, actually. I've just opened a letter to me from the CPRE, Campaign to Protect Rural England, and within it says, there is also, of course, your borough plan whose policies will conserve the local countryside and townscapes, which I thought was quite interesting. Okay, so if we go on to the agenda, item number 1 is the evacuation procedure. We're not expecting the fire alarms to go off, so if they do, we'll treat them for real and evacuate the building. Doors on both sides of the chamber, down the main staircase, out the front door and meet across by the Yorkshire Bank. And if anybody requires any assistance, let us know and we'll make sure that's given. It's also a good time to remind people to turn your phones off or put them onto silent, and also that all meetings of this council are recorded and later put out on YouTube. And I also notice in the public gallery that the member of the public is also filming the meeting tonight. Item number 2 is to receive apologies for absence. Wendy?
Apologies from Councillor Panter, Substitute Councillor Tromans. Apologies from Councillor Lloyd, Substitute Councillor Tandy. And apologies from Councillor Wilson.
Okay, so that was Pander, Lloyd and Wilson all entered their apologies. Item 3 is to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 2nd of July. You all happy that I sign those? Thank you. Item number 4 is to receive any declarations of disclosable pecuniary and other interests in accordance with the Members' Code of Conduct. Councillor Smith.
Item 1 and 2, I have to disclose I actually live next door to Western Hall in Western Hall Stables, and also I previously attended an environmental test of sound equipment there.
That it? Yeah.
Some declarations of interest on a few of these. Western Hall, I have attended a few dues there. Plus, also they did support me in my mayoral year by having collection tins on the counters. I am a portfolio holder for housing and communities, and there's at least 2 of them items in here tonight. I also went to a meeting about one of the items in here tonight, and I do know some of the objectors personally, so all of them need to be noted. Thank you.
Councillor Shepherd.
In relation to item 4, red deeps is mentioned within the document where I live, but I've not been consulted on this item. Also, when it originally came to this council in 2014, for clarity, the community centre where I'm a director was offered a commuted sum, but that isn't the case this time. Okay, thank you.
About item 6, but I made no predetermination. Thanks, Sam.
Okay. With Councillor Tandy.
Thank you, Chair. Relating to the item 6, but second to that, Chair, some time ago, I actually made a statement saying that should, having voted against the Gypsy Lane site previously, should it come back to committee, that I would again vote against it. So I have to declare that I have made a statement saying that I would vote against that application. So I am declaring it, and will leave the meeting at the appropriate time, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? No. Right. Takes us on to item 5, declarations of contact. I think some of them are actually covered by what's just been said. Unless there's any others, no? Okay, which takes us on to item 6, which is applications for planning permission on which the public have said they wish to speak. And I have to say, it is every item except for item number 7. And just for members' information, we've got an extra speaker on item number 4, Mr. Baxter, who wishes to make a comment. And item number 8, Mr. Baxter, who wishes to make a comment.
Just a change of name on this one. Item number 6. Mr. Eales is
right.
Mr. Prince is here.
Okay, I've just had a note. Item number 6, a different speaker. Instead of Mr. Andrew Eales, it's a Steve Prince. Right, item number 6. If I just run through the process for those people that haven't been here before, the officers will present the report. Following on from that, I'll take the speakers as listed. As a speaker and under the Constitution, you're allowed 3 minutes. I will be strict on that. When the egg timer goes off, I will stop you from speaking. However, there's also an opportunity for members of the committee to seek points of clarification. They can only be to clarify any points that's been made during your 3 minutes. Following on from that, the officer may wish to come back with any other comments. And then we follow that on. Once something has been proposed and seconded, it will be open for the members to debate. Hopefully we'll reach a decision tonight. In most cases we do, but on occasions things are deferred for site visits or for other information, things like that. We had a site visit earlier today in regard to our first couple of items. So I don't think I've missed anything else from that. So if we move on to item number 1, Darren, are you doing all the items tonight? If we move on to item number 1, Western Hall Marquee.
This application. This application is for the retention of a 324 square metre marquee to be used in connection with the hotel use at Western Hall Hotel. The application was deferred for a site visit previously to allow members to experience and assess sound testing at the marquee and to allow additional time for planning office to prepare suitable conditions if the application is to be approved. Western Hall Hotel is used for conferences, banqueting and events, with the main use being for weddings and entertainment. The agent has advised that the marquee is necessary for the hotel to remain economically viable and is appropriate to serve current market trends and choice. The agent also considers the marquee as a temporary structure and does not require consent. Planning permission, however, is required for the marquee as it is considered to be a building operation or operational development, and this has been upheld by planning inspectors on appeals in other parts of the country. The area in which the marquee is located is in Greenbelt, and the original part of the hotel is a Grade 2 listed Elizabethan building. To the rear is a more modern 2-storey extension with a small car park in which the marquee is located. If you can see the arrow over here. The marquee is located in this area and is partially enclosed on 3 sides. To the south, east and west are residential properties in Mill Lane and Western Lane. The properties in Western Lane being 90 to 100 metres away. The residential garden of Western Lane Farmhouse is approximately 37 metres from the marquee, whereas the actual distance from the farmhouse itself is approximately 80 metres from the marquee. And the distance from the boundary of residential properties in Claremont Close is 280 metres. The key issues to assess in the determination of this application are the principle of the development, impact on residential amenity, impact on visual amenity, and impact on highway safety. In relation to the principle of development, national and local policies state that businesses should be supported as long as any impacts can be made acceptable. The proposal is in the Greenbelt, and both national and local policy states extensions in the Greenbelt have to be proportionate. The size of the marquee, at 12 metres by 27 metres and 4.5 metres in height, is considered proportionate to the hotel. Greenbelt policy also states that the impact of the openness of the Greenbelt has to be preserved. It is considered that due to the proximity to the hotel buildings and the fact it is on land already developed as car park, the marquee does not affect the openness of the Greenbelt. In relation to the impact on residential amenity, it is considered that the main impact will be the noise and activity from the marquee. The new adopted Borough Plan, Policy BE3, states the need for high quality development that will not cause unreasonable noisy environments. Similarly, DEFRA's noise policy states that noise from entertainment should be taken into account, and national policy states that noise should be mitigated to ensure there is no significant adverse impacts on the health and quality of life. The agent has stated that the marquee is a temporary building and that there will be no material change of use to the hotel premise. Planning permission should not be required and therefore perceived noise should not be a material consideration. Planning permission, however, is required for the marquee as it is considered to be a building operation that will result in a material change. Similar applications have been upheld by several inspectors on appeals. The agent has tried to reduce the impact by citing the proposal next to the buildings to provide a noise buffer. However, the structure is not totally surrounded. However, the agent advises that speakers and music will be directed towards the main building and that noise limiters and equipment will be in operation as per health and safety requirements, and that the roof could also be insulated to reduce noise. Despite the applicant's endeavours, the Council's environmental health team have maintained its objection. Consequently, the agent has commissioned a noise assessment and a report has been submitted. As this was also discussed earlier at the site visit. The submitted noise management plan recommends that music will cease at midnight and live music will cease at 11 p.m. and amplified music within the marquee will be controlled via an in-house zone array directional speaker system via a frequency-specific digital signal processor. This will be fixed to prevent tampering and strict rules will be in place to govern outputs and only specific equipment will be allowed. It states that the sound will be monitored and suggests notices can be put up asking patrons to be quiet when leaving the premises. The Council's Environmental Health Officer, who also attended the site visit today, has assessed the documents received and have advised that they still have real concerns about the potential noise impacts from the marquee. Whilst the Council's environmental health team were initially impressed with the noise assessment and equipment on site, not all of their noise concerns have been addressed, and it is considered that it has not been sufficiently demonstrated that the marquee will not cause detrimental harm in terms of noise to neighbouring properties. Following on from the Council's environmental health initial comments, further discussions were held with them following the last committee, and their latest comments are: as advised, I do not currently believe that the applicant has satisfied us that the proposal will not cause significant adverse impact in respect of noise. However, Environmental Health have advised that if members are minded to approve the application against recommendation, then the following conditions would be appropriate. The use shall not commence until a noise management plan has been submitted and approved in writing by the Council, and the actions in the agreed noise management plan are carried out during the time the marquee is in place. The marquee shall not be used for entertainment, including live amplified music, other than between the hours of 10 a.m. until 11 p.m, and the marquee shall be vacated by the guests by 11:30 p.m. And lastly, the marquee shall be removed and the land restored to its former condition within 3 years of the date of this consent. In relation to visual amenity, the proposal is largely hidden by the existing building and gardens and is set back from 68 metres from the road. The marquee consists of materials that will deteriorate over time, but if members choose to approve the application, a time limit for the use of the structure shall be included for 3 years. In relation to the impact on highway safety, County Highways are objecting due to the loss of 25 car parking spaces, as the marquee is sited on one of the car parks. And the Highways consider that the hotel is already deficient in car parking spaces, and this could cause parking on adjacent roads. It should be noted that the Council's car parking standards are no longer in effect, but are still used as guidance. Prior to the erection of the marquee, the hotel required 235 parking spaces, a deficit of 10 spaces at that particular time, and now with the marquee there will be a further 65 spaces, making a total deficit of 75 car parking spaces. The agent has responded to the County Highways' original objection to state that they would not expect all the hotel's entertainment areas to be booked at one time, which officers agree with. The agent has confirmed that previously, when 400 people have been at the hotel, parking has not been an issue, and in any case, the hotel managers would consider parking when booking events. Consideration must also be given to the fact that the parking standards document is no longer a saved document, so it would be difficult to refuse the application based on the standards within this document. In conclusion, national and local policy states that existing business should be supported if impacts can be made acceptable. The agent advises that there is an economical need for the marquee for the business, although there is no supporting documentation to state that. Furthermore, the council would not want to see the hotel close as a result of not approving the marquee, and support of the business does carry some weight in approving the application, although not at the detriment of neighbouring properties. Indeed, the council's environmental health team considers that noise concerns have not been addressed to a point where it has been demonstrated that there will be no unacceptable noise and disturbance to residential properties, chiefly to the garden of Western Lane Farm, which would be detrimental to the residential amenity of those occupants. Therefore, the recommendation to committee is one of refusal due to unacceptable noise impacting nearby residents.
That you done, Darren, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to say, I could see somebody just over the back. There's some empty seats here if you wanted to come to the front, but okay, it's up to you. All right. Right, if I could ask Mr. Evans, please. Okay, if you press the big button on, that's it.
Once again, thank you for allowing me the time to speak on behalf of the application for Western Hall, and thank you to committee members for giving this matter your due time and consideration by coming out to site today to view the marquee, even though weather conditions weren't ideal. I don't want to repeat exactly what I said in the last committee meeting, but I hope following this visit, committee members will be assured of the fact that we're a respectable local business which recognises its responsibilities in the local neighbourhood. And as amplified music and perceived noise pollution have been raised as concern, I hope you'll have seen from today's visit that we've taken these concerns seriously, investigated the options and proved that there are solutions available to us to manage this impact. I don't want to go into the details of the sound equipment, from today's visit, but I believe it's demonstrated the adaptability of the system and how it can dramatically reduce the impact of amplified music compared to standard amplified music equipment. As already stated, we currently use the grounds for wedding and events at the hotel, for congregating photos, reception drinks, music, and the marquee won't change the use of the grounds in this manner. We've been operating in this regard for the last 27 years with minimal disturbance to local neighbours, and Class C1 business use has already been granted, and as such the impact of noise has been fully considered. But we recognise and acknowledge that there will be a greater impact due to amplified music in the evenings. And as this has been proved, there are solutions for managing these frequency levels. From today's site visit, I hope you will have seen these solutions. We believe the majority of concerns raised from local residents are rooted in kind of historical disturbance issues from the hotel was operated under previous ownership in the 70s and 80s as the nightclub Charlie's, and there were incidences during this time. The business has changed since that time, and the clientele base has changed as well, and we're entirely different, and we don't believe we should be judged on a business 30, 40 years ago. Times change and business needs change, which is precisely why we're seeking this planning consent. And in order for us to remain competitive and relevant in the marketplace and continue running a viable business, we must change and adapt to current trends. If noise is being given dominant consideration, then we believe business viability should be given equal weight in the decision-making process. This is particularly pertinent for a listed building with considerable upkeep and running costs, and is vital in protecting its stewardship for the future. The Planning Office have recommended a 3-year time limit for the marquee. Our preference would be 5 years, as there are considerable costs to cover.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr Evans. Are there any points of clarification? No?
Mr Evans, turn his microphone.
Oh yeah, sorry, could you press your button again, please? So, Mr Allfray.
First of all, thank you all for coming out to see the system. It would have been impossible to try and explain that in 3 minutes a month ago, but very easy to show you guys. So thank you very much for coming. The main point I'd like to make about what we showed you today is that the system is versatile, and if we're trying to reduce an impact at the noise sensitive dwelling, we can reduce the volume level within inside the marquee to find an acceptable volume level for the neighbours, for the business to trade, to ensure that we don't cause noise complaints. I don't agree personally with the Environmental Health Officer's opinion that this would give a significant health risk to the neighbour, and hopefully we demonstrated that to you today, that the volume levels are nearly inaudible, barely audible at the boundary, let alone a further 40 metres to the noise sensitive house. And I think the impact that we showed today is an acceptable impact. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. No? Darren, anything to come back on? No, thank you. In that case then, to enable debate to take place, can I move the recommendation which is to refuse planning permission for the reasons printed? Is that seconded? Sorry? Yeah. Any member? No? Councillor Longdon.
Last time, I say it this time again, this is daft. It's absolutely ridiculous. This is a tent. It's a very posh tent. It's not as if we've got hundreds of these around the borough, and people need these sort of facilities for weddings and stuff like that. And quite frankly, The officers have got it wrong. Sorry, but you had the chance to put it right, but you got it wrong again. And I will not vote for non-approval. And if we get to a point, I'll move approval of this, because it's a much-needed facility, it's a business, and it's just silly. The nearest residence over 70 odd metres away, probably 100 metres away. The nearest residence to that will be the actual residence of the hotel. And they're not going to upset them too much, are they? Because they'll be in dead trouble. So the whole thing, to me, is ridiculous. I didn't go on the site visit, didn't need to go on the site visit, because I thought we'd get it cracked after the last fiasco with this, but obviously not. And there are conditions on this. They're trying their best to mitigate whatever noise there might be, but I don't think there's going to be that much noise, not affecting residents anyway. So, as far as I'm concerned, it's a non-starter.
Councillor Smith.
Places Council London, we need to support our local businesses. This is the biggest local business in Bulkington, very community minded, they do a lot of work in the community, they're very conscious of their neighbours, I know that because I live next door. My experience today of that sound test was that you could hardly hear it on the boundary, and I really think Environment have got this wrong. So I will be supporting passing this, not refusing it. And I've read through these conditions and I think they make sense. A noise management plan is a very good idea, and I presume that will be left to delegated authority to sort that out. So I'm actually for this.
Councillor Watkins.
That I raised last time, because there's a couple of members here that wasn't here last time. I am again in support of this. I apologise for not going on the site visit today, but problem with my car yesterday, so I couldn't make it. I do trust in the management of the hotel to get the car parking right. I do think that 80 metres away from any building is more than enough. I do think the management can limit the times and do a good job as they have been doing before. And I also think that as a Borough Council we should be supporting local businesses, so I'll be voting in favour of this, and I think that our environmental team can work with the hotel going forward, and if there is any problems I'm sure that the hotel will be working with them in future. So yeah, thank you, Chair.
Indicate. Okay. All right. Any other member? No? Could I just ask a question, please? Because clearly it was about the level of noise rather than the car parking situation. If this was to go a different way to the recommendation tonight, if there were problems with the noise, would that again be something that environmental health would be dealing with if there were complaints about noise levels?
That would depend. If you put a condition on which is then breached, we could take action against that, so a breach of condition notice, or if it was actually a statutory noise nuisance, then we can also, environmental health can take action against that. So it would depend on what the nuisance was at the time and whether that was covered by the condition or not. The breach of condition is probably slightly easier to use in enforcement terms, but if it was a statutory noise nuisance, then environmental health would get involved as well.
So without me going through it all again, is there a condition here about the level of noise such as we experienced today? Was that the limit of the noise?
What I would suggest is that the condition suggested about a noise management plan includes within that details of the noise. So if that noise management plan is approved in accordance with that condition, that would have the noise levels in it. So if those noise levels were breached, then we would be able to serve a breach of condition notice against that.
Well, certainly from my point of view, I would want to make sure that that was included in any condition, because I think it was slightly unfortunate today because of the weather conditions. I don't think the noise would travel as much in the wet conditions as it would on a dry day. And so for me it was very, very balanced. So we'll see. The recommendation, which was moved and seconded, and stated. All those in favour of that? And against?
That's lost.
So that's lost, yeah. So from the chair, can I move that the application is allowed for the following reasons: that it's not believed that there'll be an impact on the neighbouring property by the noise generated, and that further conditions are included that officers be given delegated powers to agree a noise management plan. The hours be restricted from 10 a.m. till 2300 hours, 11 o'clock at night, and that the the marquee is allowed on a temporary basis for 3 years. Are members happy with those conditions? Is there anything else they feel that they need to include? Councillor Longdon.
It's nothing to retention for 5 years rather than 3. We've established the fact that it's not going to be that much of a problem. I'm a bit worried about what you're saying in terms of drawing up a noise plan, because it may be too onerous, and we won't have a say after that. And if it's too onerous, then it won't go ahead. And I think that's a bit unfair.
Okay,
to place that on people at this time, and it's unfair to ask us to vote on something that we don't know about.
Okay, well, that was a suggestion from the applicant. Just so that we're getting it right then, can I, as part of that, what I've moved, can I move those things, the noise management plan, the 10 o'clock in the morning till 11 o'clock at night, and the retention for 3 years? Is that seconded? I'm not taking the actual vote now, I'm taking the vote on those additional conditions. All those in favour of those additional conditions? And against? And abstentions? Okay, so they're added into any vote that we take now. So it's been moved and seconded that we allow the application with those further conditions. All those in favour of that? 10. And against? And abstentions? Thank you. Okay, so that's approved. Right, thank you, which takes us on to item number 2, which is the listed building consent for the retention of the marquee, same site. Darren?
This application was on the agenda of the previous committee on the 2nd of July, but was deferred alongside the application for the marquee. Since Western Hall is a Grade 2 listed building consent is also required for the marquee, as the marquee is within the curtilage of the listed building. The original part of the hotel is Elizabethan and includes several architectural features of interest such as stone mullions, transoms, moulded kneelers, cornices and pilasters. The listed building status for the building and the gate piers was first registered in 1949. The key issue to assessing the determination of this application is the impact on the listed building of Western Hall. Both national policy and the Borough plan state that the need to value and conserve the historic environment, and both encourage development that sustains, conserves and enhances the historic heritage. It is considered that due to its temporary nature, the marquee does not directly affect the setting of the listed building. English Heritage have been consulted and have not objected. Indeed, they did not even wish to comment. It is therefore recommended to committee to approve the application for listed building consent. However, due to the materials used, it is expected that the marquee will degrade over time, and thereby reducing its visual appearance to the detriment of the setting of Weston Hall. Consequently, it is necessary to impose a condition to restrict the consent for a maximum of 3 years, whereupon the applicant will need to reapply for planning permission and list the building consent or remove the structure.
Done, Darren?
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Evans.
Not much to really say on this point other than obviously we...
Sorry, it might be useful for everybody. Perhaps if you just pull the mic a bit nearer to you.
Oh, sorry.
It moves it wherever you want to put it.
Just to say, not much really to mention on this point, really, because you're minded to approve. Other than just to reiterate that it is screened by the hotel mainly, the marquee, so it's not really of any massive object in front of the main listed building, which is obviously of main concern. There's no objection from Heritage, and it is obviously a temporary marquee. As I mentioned in the first planning consent, we would prefer a 5-year period for the marquee, in terms of its cost and obviously the business viability as a result of that cost. But yeah, really, that's all I've got to mention on this point.
Okay, thank you. Are there any... Mr. Alfrey? Okay, thank you. In that case, to enable debate to take place, can I move the recommendation, which is to grant listed building consent subject to the conditions printed? Is that seconded? Thank you. Any member? No? The recommendation is in front of us to grant the listed building consent. All those in favour of that? That's unanimous, thank you. Okay, so that's approved as well. We can move on to item number 3 then. The land on the garage site at Pine Tree Road, Bedworth.
This application is for the erection of 10 new dwellings comprising of 6 new 2-bedroom houses and 4 new 1-bedroom apartments, and includes the demolition of the existing garages on site. Vehicular access is proposed off Pine Tree Road between numbers 20 and 22. Through here. The key issues in determining this application: the principle of residential development, impact on residential amenity, impact on visual amenity, impact on highway safety, and planning obligations. The MPPF states that planning policies and decisions should give substantial weight to the value of suitable brownfield land within settlements for homes and other identified needs. The site is a brownfield site that is currently underused, as 20 of the 35 garages are not in use, and has a dishevelled appearance. It is considered that the site would therefore be a sustainable use of land in a predominantly residential area, with the added benefit of providing 10 affordable and much-needed housing units, which are to be owned and maintained by Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council. Furthermore, the site is allocated as a non-strategic housing site in the borough plan, and therefore the principle of housing development is considered acceptable. To the west is Conifer Court Sheltered Housing Complex. There are windows that overlook onto the site and would face the rear of plots 1 and 2. However, there is 20 metres separation distance between these windows, which complies with paragraph 9.3 of the Residential Design Guide. With regards to the impact on Oak Close, number 21 has 2 side-facing windows at ground floor and 1 at first floor, which all appear to be non-habitable and therefore not protected. In any case, they do not directly face the side of plot 6. Number 21 has habitable room windows to the rear elevation. However, plot 6 is set back approximately 40 metres away from the rear of number 21, and it is not considered that there is any significant impact on the 45-degree guideline. A first floor side-facing bathroom window is proposed to plot 6 that would face the rear garden of number 21 at a distance of approximately 5 metres. However, as this is a non-habitable room, there are no significant issues with overlooking. In relation to number 25, their rear garden adjoins the site. Plots 7 and 8 have been designed so there is not a first floor rear-facing window that could overlook this garden, and instead the proposed first floor bedroom is served by a side-facing window. Plots 9 and 10 propose a first floor rear-facing bedroom window which would be set back approximately 6 metres from the rear garden of number 25. Paragraph 9.5 of the Residential Design Guide normally requires a separation distance of 7 metres. However, the area of garden that it would overlook is not considered to be usable private amenity space, as it is in the top corner of the garden and would therefore not lead to significant overlooking. It is also considered that the distance standards are met in relation to within the site itself. With regards to the visual amenity, it is considered that the site is of a sufficient size to create its own character and would provide a cohesive group. The dwellings would be 2-storey with pitched roofs. They are to be constructed off-site using modern methods of construction and would then be craned onto the site. Materials proposed include brick cladding, render and concrete roof tiles, which are considered acceptable. Detailing above and below the windows and an entrance canopy over the main entrance door are proposed, which together with the materials add some visual interest. It is therefore considered that the design and appearance are in accordance with policy BE3 of the Borough Plan and the Council's Residential Design Guide. Whilst the MPPF sets out that planning obligations should be considered where otherwise unacceptable development could be made acceptable, they should only be sought where they are necessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms, directly related to development, and fairly and reasonably related in scale and kind to the development. Requests for contributions were made from Nuneaton and Bedworth Parks and Countryside and the Sports Development and Leisure, along with George Eliot Hospital, all of which were acceptable, directly related and considered fair. However, a financial viability assessment has been submitted as part of the application to demonstrate that the developers cannot support any planning obligations. The submitted viability assessment has been considered by Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council's Principal Land and Property Officer, who has concluded that the assessment appears to be sound and that it would be financially unviable for the developer to pay any requested planning obligations. Taking into account the above assessment, it is considered that the proposed development would be sustainable use of underused and neglected brownfield site that is in accordance with the development plan and other policies within the National Policy and Planning Framework. Furthermore, there are no material considerations or adverse impacts which indicate that the application should be refused. As such, it is recommended to committee that the application is approved subject to conditions on the agenda and addendum. Thank you.
Thanks, Darren. John Roberts.
Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of the application. My name is John Roberts and I'm from RG&P, the architect for the application. I believe your officer's report provides a fair and balanced assessment of the merits of the site, but I'd like to emphasise the following points. We have worked constructively and objectively with your officers to be at a position where the scheme is presented with a recommendation to approve before you tonight. There are no technical objections to the development and all other comments raised were addressed during the application. The development will be built using modern methods of construction, with modules constructed in a factory and delivered and assembled on site. This will reduce the amount of time on site by approximately 12 weeks compared to more traditional forms of construction, hereby reducing disruption to residents, meaning the dwellings will be occupied sooner. This offers higher levels of workmanship, finishes and insulation compared to traditional brick and block forms of construction. The site is prone to antisocial behaviour and the council, in conjunction with the emergency services, have dealt with a number of issues at the garage site over the last few months. Developing the site will provide a much more meaningful and attractive area and provide much needed affordable housing. Pedestrian safety has been considered throughout the site, with traffic calming measures being added at the entrance of the site and footpaths providing safe pedestrian access. Parking in the locality can be difficult. The site will be self-sufficient in terms of parking, with ample spaces being provided for the dwellings. There will be 2 spaces for each house and 1 per apartment, with 2 visitors for the apartments and an additional 4 spaces available for general use. Tenants who have existing garages on the site have been offered alternative arrangements where possible. 2 garages have already been vacated due to the tenants' concerns about antisocial behaviour over the past month, with alternative garages offered. The footpath leading to Oak Close through the development site will be retained, allowing people to cross through the site to the amenities on Pine Tree Road. It will be well overlooked and therefore safer and more secure. The layout has been assessed in terms of residential amenity and found to comply with the policy standards and distances within the residential design guide. There is a shortage of affordable housing across the borough and homeliness has risen considerably. Smaller properties are needed to provide homes for smaller families. The mix has been directly advised by the Housing Department to address the current need. As of the 23rd of July, there were 79 families in temporary accommodation waiting to be housed. There were only 4 properties that were ready to let, but only 2 of them were actually appropriate for the families. So you can see the shortfall in this type of accommodation. Your officers conclude that the design and layout is acceptable and will make a positive contribution to housing supply, and therefore trust the committee will support your officers' recommendation. Thank you.
Clarification? No. Darren, anything else to come back on? No. In that case, to enable debate to take place, can I move the recommendation, which is to grant planning permission? Is that seconded? Any member? Councillor Tromans.
I've got to say, this sounds like an absolutely excellent project. It's a great use of brownfield site that's a bit troubled, and it's going to be a benefit to the area and a good use, as I say, of brownfield land, and it's state-of-the-art new building technology, and you know, what's not to love about this? I want to support this application. I do have 2 concerns though, one minor, one major. First of all, the officer said that there is a window to a bathroom that overlooks somebody's garden. I assume that the window will have to have obscured glass. If it doesn't, can we condition that, please? The second thing, which is a bit more worrying, is about the Section 106 or the sill stuff. Because these have been worked out, you know, to the penny by Parks and Sports and the George Eliot Trust, and it seems that they're perfectly reasonable amounts and only total 41,000 altogether, spread over 10 houses, 4,000 each. If it's not viable to have all that money, is there some amount that could be agreed with the developer? The thing that concerns me is also that the person that determined that they weren't viable is also the same person making the application. It's the same director, apparently.
No, it's not.
Oh, right. So the applicant is Dawn Dawson. And could the officer just remind us who was it who made the determination about viability?
The senior officer would be Ian Powell, not Dawn Dawson.
Okay. So it was two separate ones. Thank you for confirming that. So that's less of a concern. As long as we condition the window, I'm very happy to support this, Chair. Thank you.
Did you just want to answer the thing, just to clarify the bathroom window? It will be obscure glass, yeah? They normally are.
Yes, Councillor.
Okay, thank you. Did I see anybody else indicate? Councillor Shepherd. I couldn't hear.
Councillor Shepherd, that's what the comments were from Parks, planning policy and land and property. The comments from land and property were to do with the viability assessment. The ones from Parks were to do with requesting the contribution, and one from planning policy was to point out that it is a non-strategic site in the adopted local plan.
Okay, if there's no other members, a couple of comments I wanted to make, particularly as I've been the ward councillor there for many years. And I have to say, it's some years back when officers contacted every member of this council to ask if they got any sites that they may want to identify for possible future use. And this was one of any number that I submitted to be looked at within Bede Ward. In fact, we had a very nice development on another garage site just further up in Beechwood Road, and I'd recommend any member to go and have a look at that to see how sites like that can be developed. I have two issues with this application. One is that the planning process should be what it is. It should be to improve the built environment. It shouldn't be to make things worse for existing people. And by that I mean the garage users or the site. Now, the site is what it is, but despite what's said on page 43, I think it's the other way around. I would say that there's 2/3 of those garages that are actually secured at the moment. I wouldn't say they've all got vehicles coming in and out of them, because you can tell by the grass that's grown over the bottom of the doors that it's not, but they must have some use. I asked about 3, possibly 4 months ago, that a full consultation be taken out with the people that lease those garages. That, to my knowledge, has not been done. And I'm sorry, I don't believe that consultation should be after the event. But you do have to balance that out. There would have been at least double the amount of garages on this site that have had to be knocked down over the years. My other issue is not only with this application, but with with lots of other applications, and Councillor Troman's touched on it. And it's about the viability of applications. We are told an officer assesses it and that's it. It's about time that the members of this committee started having those statistics put in front of them, so at least they can question whether they believe it's right or not. And I think that needs to be looked at as part of the planning process. Having said all that, and we know that a lot of things are a balanced thing, the things to the benefit of this application, the garage site it's quite a big site. A lot of the garages have already gone. It's not a very pleasant walkway through from Oak Close through there to Pine Tree Road, which has been made worse by high fencing being put along the jitty from Oak Close into this site. So it will improve the safety of that site. The actual housing The modular type developments we're starting to see come on board now, and again you can get some really good designs, and that's good. We've had a lot of antisocial behaviour on this site, fires, allegations of drugs, and bearing in mind it's also sitting right next door to one of our very sheltered schemes. You know, that's been an issue. And of course, everybody's aware of our need for more affordable housing, and where we question what's affordable, I think in this particular case we know that it will be managed in that way. And so, on balance, although say I was upset about the lack of the consultation about the garages and the lack of the stats on viability, I would welcome this for the improvement to the area and to the provision of extra housing that's needed. Okay, so there's nobody else. In that event, the recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to the conditions attached. All those in favour of that? Okay, that's unanimous, thank you. Okay, if we can move on to item number 4, west of Maple Park, land north of Gypsy Lane.
This is an application with all this is an outline application with all matters reserved for the erection of up to 575 dwellings, including a mixed-use neighbourhood centre, public open space, footpaths, cycleways, water attenuation basins and associated infrastructure, including the realignment of Gypsy Lane. The site is located west of Maple Park and north of Gypsy Lane and marks the southern edge of the urban boundary of Nuneaton and extends over 28 hectares in total. The site is bounded by Gypsy Lane to the south, the Coventry Canal to the west, and Griff Brook and playing fields of George Eliot School to the north, and Wenbrook to the east. There are a number of mature trees on site which are arranged in 2 columns, and these delineate historic field boundaries. The site exhibits good linkages to the nearby National Cycle Network, both Nuneaton and Bedworth town centres, the existing town centre train stations, and the more recent Bermuda Park station on St George's Road. There have been 22 objections from 20 addresses, and one from Councillor Gondarka. Notwithstanding the level of objection received, the application is being presented to committee at the request of Councillor Joe Shepherd. The key issues to assessing the determination of this application are the principle of the development, visual amenity and landscape character, residential amenity, highway safety, traffic flows and accessibility, flood risk, ecology, green infrastructure improvements and planning obligations. The site is allocated for housing in the Borough Plan under policy HSG3. The policy sets out how this strategic site will be developed for residential use, but this is also to include a mix of community uses. The key development principles included in the policy mention that this land will provide circa 575 dwellings in a mix of dwelling types and sizes, playing open space facilities, footways, cycleways, and provision of on-site bus infrastructure and contributions for various off-site provisions. The site is located with the Nuneaton and Bedworth urban fringe landscape character area, which is deemed to be more of a moderate value in need of enhancement with the conservation of farmland, hedgerows and trees. However, the evidence indicates that this specific site is of a lower value and sensitivity than the wider character area, and therefore has the capacity to accommodate residential development without causing substantial harm to the character of the area. As this is an outline application, there could be many different final forms of the development, since the details are reserved for consideration later. That said, given the indicated amount of open space provided, especially that which flanks the site on the eastern side and that to the north, regard has been had to the existing setting, and it is considered that the site adequately addresses the setting of the area. With regards to the impact on residential amenity, the nearest residential properties are those to the north, east of Braystone Road, and to the immediate north of Red Deeps. These residential properties will be separated from the site by a good amount of open space and green landscaping. And while the reserve matters will dictate the final layout, there are no concerns over the loss of residential amenity as a result of this development. All distance standards in the Council's adopted residential design guide are more than met in the illustrative master plan submitted with the scheme. With regards to highway safety, the applicant has submitted a transport assessment to assess the highways and transport implications of the proposed development. It is proposed that the access will be gained via 2 new junctions with Gypsy Lane. Furthermore, Gypsy Lane would be realigned within the site in order to remove a sharp bend that is subject to the local safety concern. This would improve safety, and along with the introduction of lighting and potentially a reduced speed limit and gateway features, would further enhance road safety. The junctions and road alignment have been designed in such a way that buses could potentially access the site in the future, and indeed has been requested by Highways that a bus service would be partially funded by development through a Section 106 agreement. This potential for a bus service helps to increase the sustainability of the proposal. The transport assessment concludes that the proposed development will have had no material adverse impact upon the operation of the nearby road network and would be accessible to a range of services and facilities, enabling journeys by sustainable modes of transport consistent with policy. The response from the Highway Authority is one of no objection, subject to conditions and planning obligations, which are considered acceptable by officers. With regards to flood risk, part of the applicant site along the northern and eastern boundaries is within flood zones 2 and 3. The MPPF requires that consideration is given to the potential impact of flooding and new development, whilst also ensuring that flood risk is not increased elsewhere as a result of the development. As such, the applicant has submitted a flood risk assessment with the application, and this was subsequently assessed by both the County Flood Risk Team and Environmental Agency. The County Flood Risk Team have no objection but have requested conditions to be added. Similarly, the Environment Agency raised no objection subject to conditions. These conditions have been agreed with the applicant, and these will be added to any approval. It is considered that the conditions proposed will adequately mitigate any potential impact of flood risk, and this complies with policy NE4 of the adopted Borough Plan. With regards to planning obligations, policy HS1 of the Borough Plan states that development will be required to provide infrastructure appropriate to the scale and context of the site in order to mitigate any impacts of the development and address the needs associated with the development. The MPPF sets out that the planning obligations should be considered with otherwise unacceptable development. However, paragraph 56 of the MPPF notes that these obligations should only be sought where they meet all the following tests: necessary to the development, directly related to development and fair and reasonable. The applicant has agreed to pay over £5,500,000 towards infrastructure requirements across the borough, including to education, canal improvements, the Turnover Bridge, highways, as well as provide up to 144 affordable housing units. Nonetheless, councillors should note that the applicant has refused to agree to a request submitted by NBC's Sports Development and Leisure team and Parks and Countryside team, as in the applicant's opinion they are not so compliant. The Sports Development team have requested funding for swimming pools, sports halls, community halls, athletics, cycling, artificial grass pitches, whilst the plain open space requested for destination parks and maintenance of those parks. However, planning officers differ on this, as there will be an identified need for sports facilities as a result of the development. Likewise, there will be increased use of Borough's highest level of park provision, Riversley Park and Miners Welfare Park. Both of these requests for planning contributions are necessary, directly related and fair and reasonable. In regards to the sports development contributions, officers have pointed out that elsewhere in the Borough Plan, Policy SA1, it makes particular reference to community sports and physical activity facilities. Officers also point out that the site is referenced within the infrastructure delivery plan, which refers to sports and physical activity facilities. However, the applicant has correctly pointed out that within the Strategic Housing Site Policy, HSG3, neither sports development monies nor destination park contributions are included as a necessary requirement of the development. They also point out that all of the strategic sites within the Borough Plan do require sports development monies and destination park contributions. Consequently, the applicant contends that these two requests cannot be included. With regards to the impact on ecology, the MPF outlines a need to minimise the impact of proposed developments on biodiversity, as well as contributing to and enhancing this where possible. It particularly highlights the need to consider the impact on ecological networks, protected wildlife priority species and priority habitats. Consequently, the applicant has submitted an ecological planning report with the application. The report consists of a full desktop study, an extended Phase 1 habitat survey and a range of field surveys for endangered species which may be present on the site. The desktop study confirmed there are no international, national and locally designated sites within a 2-mile radius of the site, other than Griff Hill Quarry, which is recognised for its geological value. In regards to habitats on the site, the Phase 1 survey identified several types of habitat which fall within the site boundary. The site is predominantly arable land which is interspersed with mature trees and bordered by watercourses, tall ruderal vegetation, scrub and hedgerows. The ecological survey provided by the applicant has surveyed the site with protected and notable species in mind, covering foraging and community bats, as well as badgers, water voles, birds and reptiles. The Warwickshire Wildlife Trust has been consulted and raised no objection to the scheme, subject to conditions, which are to be added as part of any approval. With regard to the provision of green infrastructure, the application proposes a good deal of open space. In fact, it totals 8.74 hectares of this across the site. There is also to be 3 surface water attenuation basins extending to some 1.9 hectares, and although not used as a formal open space, they are to be kept permanently open to attenuate surface water. Conditions are likely to be included as to ensure that there is provision of a community park on the site. Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council Parks team have responded with an objection to the scheme on the grounds that parts of the indicative layout and master plan do not do enough in regards to footpaths to access open space and to facilitate movement across the site. However, this will be covered by details to be submitted with suggested conditions and obligations in the legal agreement. It is therefore recommended to the committee to approve the application subject to conditions in the agenda and addendum and signing a Section 106 agreement.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you. Councillor Tracy Shepherd. Not here. Councillor Condicle.
I'm still very unsure what's happening over this turnback bridge. If we look in the borough plan, we now actually have a policy HSG3 for this site, and it would have been nice if this had been fully reproduced in the document, because this is actually what we're doing. We've had a planning inquiry, we've looked at HSG3, and we've got a whole lot of policies that clearly say what we should be doing. And absolutely clear in this, at point 10, is the canal turnback bridge. And it says, development proposals will investigate suitability of the turnback bridge, not may, will. And if possible, financial contributions will be sought for its delivery. Where demonstrated that this delivery would not be technically feasible, an alternative bridge provision will be provided. So it is clear in here, we can't just have the turnback bridge as a maybe, whatever. We should have already done a feasibility study according to the borough plan to see whether the use of the turnback bridge could be used. And the turnback bridge is really, really important. If you look at the documentation, look at the map on the screen, on the west side, which is the left for people who don't know east and west, the site had a canal. And the only place to cross that canal is Gypsy Lane, which has no footpath and is a very fast road, or halfway along there's a turnback bridge which then takes you round the edge of Falklands Farm and could potentially be a brilliant route into Bermuda Park Railway Station, the Coventry Road, where there's buses to Coventry, Bedworth, Leicester. The Coventry Road has a buzz every 10 minutes. So this turnback bridge is really important. And at the Borough Plan inquiry, we made the point that there needs to be a high quality route from this site that is lit all the time. We can't have people walking through Griff Hollows at 5 o'clock on a winter's evening. The connectivity is really, really important. And it's actually in the borough plan. We actually have a policy clearly says this will be studied to see if the turnback bridge is viable. And if it's not viable, we will actually provide an alternative bridge. And it goes on about other things about historic, etc. We also in this have quite a bit in the borough plan about the road and the improvement to the road. We have bits in the borough plan making sure that we respect the trees, because obviously the Gypsy Lane is a key corridor of trees. They're really, really important. We will lose, and we have to lose, some trees to actually straighten out the road. But we really need to reinforce the trees along there. And if you look at the master plan, it is really light on trees and green infrastructure on the south side. They've got this big park area, they put it all together. But actually people living on that estate, the canal side and the Gypsy Lane side are far weaker in terms of open space and trees. So I do think we need to look and maybe make sure if we don't agree this...
Thank you, Councillor Condicle. Are there any points of... Councillor Llewellyn Nash. It's a point of clarification to the Speaker.
Oh, sorry, no.
Clarification to the Speaker. No? Okay, thank you. Bill Shepherd. Not here. Andrew Wintersgill.
I'm Andrew Wintersgill, a partner of David Locke Associates, planning consultants to the applicant Tremport Investments. By my side is Chris Hall, a director at Tremport, who will help me to answer any questions you might have. This evening is the culmination of nearly 10 years of effective joint working with your officers in seeking to bring forward this well-located site on the southern edge of Nuneaton for high-quality residential development. That joint working has found expression in a planning performance agreement between ourselves and the Council. We understand this is the first planning performance agreement this Council has entered into. It has cemented a successful working relationship between us. The Council's approval of this application has been held up by the long delays in preparing and adopting the Borough Plan. Indeed, your officers recommended an approval as long ago as 2014, well before the plan was adopted. The committee's refusal at that time was solely because the site had not yet been released from the Greenbelt and allocated for housing in a final version of this plan. 5 years later, following the Council's adoption of the plan last month, no impediments to a grant of outline permission remain. The application is fully in accordance with the plan. The Government's National Planning Policy Framework requires such applications to be approved without delay. This site was probably the least contentious of all of the Council's strategic housing sites during the preparation of the Borough Plan. Your approval of our application this evening would be a textbook example of planning as it should be. Produce a plan and approve an application according with it, without hesitation. Your approval of our application this evening would not only enable up to 575 much-needed homes to be built without further delay, but would also release up to 144 affordable homes, 25% of the total number of homes in accordance with council policy, making significant contributions towards meeting local housing needs. But this development wouldn't be a mere housing estate. We made provision for a new neighbourhood centre on the site, which could accommodate local shops and community facilities, and we also propose a new community park containing a wide range of play facilities with an extensive new public open space on the northern and eastern sides of the site. In all these ways, our application proposals will benefit existing residents of the area, as well as providing a high-quality living experience for residents of the development itself. No fundamental objections to our application remain. In particular, highways and transport issues are fully resolved to the satisfaction of the Highway Authority. We've agreed the detailed wording of the conditions to be attached to any permission with your officers. The drafting of the Section 106 agreement is already very well advanced, such that the agreement can be completed shortly. You will also determine Arbour's application for an employment development on the adjacent Falkland site a little later this evening. We have worked closely with the Arbour team in taking forward our respective proposals, including in providing for a cycle and pedestrian connection between the two developments via the turnover bridge over the canal. A feasibility study has been completed and Section 106 contributions will be made. Our residential development perfectly complements Arbour's employment provision. We urge you to approve both applications.
Thank you, Mr. Wintersgill.
Thank you very much.
Are there any points of clarification? No? Okay, thank you. Mr. Baxter.
Quick skim through the documents. Most of the issues on my mind have been covered, like the wildlife, water voles, stuff like that. Councillor Condacor started to touch on the turnover bridge issues. I think there is a big issue there that does need resolving, but I can tell you the bridge is owned by Canal and River Trust, so hopefully they're here today to help address any issues relating to that bridge. So you can't just go plodding over there making changes to that bridge without their consent. It is a listed bridge as well. It's in the register of listed buildings. It's 200 years old. Any materials and techniques will have to be sympathetic to that. The footpath you intend to link to on the opposing side of the canal to the development, the Falkland Farm side, there's about 200 to 300 yards of footpath. That is in really, really poor condition. The towpath side, the main side, is what Canal and River Trust call their ideal towpath, footpath. It's got the
He's knocked your mic off.
So the opposing side of the canal, the footpath side there, to bring that up to full standard, you're going to have to knock in steel pilings over 200 to 300 yards, which will be costing about £25 per inch. And if you do the maths, the contribution here, which Canal and River Trust have indicated, is £22,500. They're asking similar from the Falkland Farm development, £50,000 won't touch it. You're going to need at least £500,000 to bring the bridge up to standard and that footpath up to standard to link the whole thing into Griff Hollows. There's a lot of head shaking. There's precedence for the piling work accessible from Canal and River Trust. It is around about £25 per foot for piling. You've got to get contractors in.
Excuse me, please.
But Like I say, you need to straighten out the deal with Canal and River Trust on this. They'll want some sort of dowry for long-term maintenance. It won't be a county council footpath, it will still be owned by Canal and River Trust. And then, you know, you've got to get the workers in. They're going to have to be Canal and River Trust certified. They're going to have all the risk assessments. You're going to need the boats in there, possible canal closures. The bridge abutments need repairing. There's a lot of washout under Turnover Bridge at the moment, and the coping stones need replacing. There's been vandalism recently that needs addressing. Further to that, for amenity use, it would be nice to see some sort of picnic site with car parking so the broader community can come down to the canal and actually make use of it there. That would be brilliant. Obviously, the plan isn't fully cemented in place yet. It's still fluid, so that can still be done. And finally, you need to remember they're going to have a great view of the industrial estates.
Are there any points of clarification? Darren or Catherine, any points you need to come back on? No? Okay.
I'm due to speak on number 8 as well. It's similar concerns, but I quite like to get away with.
Oh, okay. Thank you for letting us know. Okay, thank you.
Same thing.
Right. To enable debate to take place, can I move the recommendation which is to grant planning permission subject to a legal agreement and the conditions printed? Is that seconded? Thank you. Any member? Councillor Sargent.
Picked up, and it might be in the plan, is a footpath on Gypsy Lane, because even sort of, you know, even as it stands, as it is at the minute, it's sort of quite windy. It's a fairly fast road, so you know, I know there's a cycleway and a footpath that goes through it that connects in with other cycleways and footways, but you know, potentially people will walk down the road or try to walk down the road. The other thing that I picked up is the access to the site when it's being built, because there's a 7.5 tonne weight bridge, I think it is 7.5 tonne on Gypsy Lane, and then Marston Lane I think is 7.5 tonne except for access, so they won't be able to come down there. So basically they're going to be coming up the Lutterworth Road or through Bulkington, because they can't come from the M69 because that's an 18 tonne weight. So there's only going to be one way in and one way out. So all of a sudden we're going to get lots of trucks and waste, you know, travelling on sort of roads that are, I mean, the top end of Gypsy Lane towards Bulkington Lane is deteriorating quite badly already. Also, trucks are, quarry trucks are using Doningthorne Avenue as a cut through, which they shouldn't be doing. So I just want to know how they're going to manage access to the site.
Okay, the Ways Officer from the county who might want to respond to them, please, Ben.
If I start with the pedestrian works, excuse me. There is proposals to improve footway cycleway along Gypsy Lane towards the existing residential area, but the footways are going to be set back within the site, and that will be dealt with through the reserve matters. There's also a contribution to change the speed limit on Gypsy Lane as part of the works as well, to reduce it from its existing limits. We're introducing a new community that isn't there at the moment. Having a high-speed road next to a new community isn't very conducive. We've got to change the nature of the road. So we're going to be getting rid of the sharp bend through these works and reducing the speed limit and providing footway pedestrian connectivity to the existing residential area. In terms of construction traffic, you are right, Councillor, there are limited routes. With Nuneaton and Bedworth, we will ask for a construction management plan, and as part of that we will look for HGV routing to be agreed with the applicants, and with Nuneaton we'll try and agree suitable times for deliveries to take place, especially if they're going past schools or sensitive locations.
And this is an outline application, so lots more detail would come back to us anyway at some point. Councillor Tromans.
I am unenthusiastic about this development for historic reasons. Like some of the other councillors, I was against the previous attempt to build there. However, I keep an open mind. I look at this and I see that by going through the papers, there is just no planning reason that I can get hold of that I think the council could sustain if we were to reject this and go to appeal. And I think that's because it's in the borough plan, and whilst I feel the numbers in the borough plan are too high and that they ought to be brought down, until that happens, until such day as that ever happens, we have the plan we have. And it has been passed, and this is in it, and this is part of it, and as I say, on that basis, and highways aren't objecting and all the rest of it, there's nothing there. So I cannot find a reason to vote against this. And there are some silver linings. The road being made much safer and slower and straightened out and having the lights on it will be much better. A footpath that's set well away from the road, actually on the site itself. Things like this make me feel a lot happier. I'm very pleased to hear Ben talk about the traffic management plan there for the construction, and hope that that will include wheel washes and whatever, because it's such a mess up at the other end with the quarry sometimes. We don't want to add to that and make the existing set of community lives miserable by having a whole load of dust and mud and whatever. So there are some good things coming out of this. An awful lot of sill. And although the applicant hasn't been too happy about parks and sports development, good on them for asking. Don't ask, you don't get. So I'm very pleased that the council has looked to press for as much sill as it can out of that. That's part of taking new development, is that the wider community gets compensated for that, and that the appropriate money is made available for the extra use of schools and open spaces. So there are some silver linings to this. I wish we weren't having to build on this bit of farmland because our borough numbers in our plan were smaller, but they're not. And with the plan that we have, as I say, I cannot find a legitimate reason to reject this.
I've just got a few points I wanted to bring up, and you'll probably correct me if I'm staying at the right place or the wrong place. But the MPPF outlines a need to minimise the impact of proposed developments on biodiversity. I was going to ask if, like I say, it's probably at the wrong place, but when this estate is built, if the estate's built, we could have some biodiversity corridors going through it. There's lots of different ways we can do things like that. Job-friendly gravel boards and things like that. There's all different things, the back boxes and stuff like that. But rather than just getting rid of the field, replacing with something. I do notice that Warwickshire Wildlife Trust have been consulted and raised no objection, which I just find a bit bizarre. Is that because they had no objection, or is it because they might have been out of the office at that particular time? The ecological survey provided by the applicant has surveyed the site with protected notable species in mind. Firstly, in regard to bats, 2 trees were to be removed, numbers 11 and 12 on the perimeter plan, which are near to the edge. And so the 2 trees that are noted are to be removed. I just found that a little bit of a problem as well. I did also notice on the turnover bridge that Canal and River Trust have objected against this and are still objecting against it. So that's obviously a problem that we need to look at. I would like to know I know you've said that our parks have said some part of it, but did the countryside part of parks say anything? Because usually Matt and Eleanor would have something to say on something as big as this. The destination parks, I think it will be will both benefit, both Nuneaton and Bedworth, but destination parks can benefit from this. And I'm just a bit disappointed that parks are getting overlooked really on this, and our parks objections should be taken seriously by any developer when they've come into this borough. So I'm just a bit disappointed on the way parks have been overlooked. That's all I have to say. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. I'm to think about the canal bridge, because I think that's something that we've probably all noticed and got some slight concerns about. And I think in relation to the your biodiversity thing, it's a good point to make about runs for hedgehogs and other animals. But I think maybe that's one to save up for the detail, and obviously the agents here listening to what's been said, so we'll probably take it on board ready for that. So could you try and clarify some stuff about the canal bridge, please?
Try. Right. The concern about the turnover bridge, there has been a structural survey and a viability assessment done of the bridge. The Canal and River Trust aren't objecting to the use of the bridge. What they're objecting to is the mechanism by which the works to the bridge take place and the future maintenance of it. Now, the bridge itself isn't within the application site. Indeed, the towpath is in between the edge of the application site and the bridge, which is also not owned by the applicant. It's a similar situation with the land on the other side, in that the bridge isn't owned by them either, although that site does actually abut up to the bridge. Because of that, officers feel that the only thing that they can do is ask for a contribution towards utilising that bridge as a footpath and cycleway. Now, that contribution will include three amounts of money. One, a contribution towards actually laying it out as a footpath and cycleway, and the feasibility study did include some costs for doing that, and there's a contribution from this site and there's a contribution from the other site on the other side of the road. That's not, sorry, the other side of the canal. That's not completely covering the whole cost of that footway and cycleway, because the idea is that that will link into the wider network, which includes links through to Bermuda Station and further afield, and links across the land to the east of this site through to the existing footpath cycleway, which goes through the Marston Lane site and over the bridge and through Paul's land. So it's not just these developments that will be using that link, and that's why it's only a contribution rather than half the cost of the whole works. So there's a contribution to that. There's an amount to do with the legal works, which the county and the Borough Council would have to work together to do, to actually designate that footpath cycleway as a footpath and cycleway, which is a provision under the Highways Act. And there will also be a cost in the Section 106 towards 10-year maintenance period of the footpath and cycleway as it goes over the bridge. I hope that clarifies it. Just to say that the bridge isn't, as I say, the bridge isn't in either of the application sites, nor is it in either of the allocations in the local plan. So asking for a contribution is not different to us asking for a contribution towards George Eliot Hospital. We have no control over once that contribution is in. It's up to us for George Eliot Hospital. We just pay it over, and they then have to tell us how that money is spent. So it's not unusual that we ask for contributions for off-site contributions. I think the difficulty here is that the bridge is so close to both application sites. But once that contribution is received, the County Council and the Borough Council will work together with the Canals and River Trust to facilitate that footpath cycleway going in.
Okay. Ben, you wanted something?
What Catherine's just said, from the County Council's perspective, the County Council can't use any of its mechanisms because there is no adopted road which the bridge links onto. We can only use our powers based on adopted highway or adopted footpaths, and it's not a public right-of-way either. So I fully endorse what Catherine's just said.
Okay, Councillor Shepherd.
I am a little concerned. I want a clarification from the officers in terms of what we were allowed to discuss and what we weren't, because I know some items had appeared on page 55 for not discussion, and then some have appeared on 57 saying they are for discussion. So I was a little confused on that. It's come a little bit clearer. I am surprised how quick this has come back to committee, especially as the inspector said about using a sequential approach, using brownfields first. I'm aware to sat with officers for 2 years with agreements, but I have concerns about the consultation with the residents being over 2 years ago. and the lack of any new consultation. I do feel the landscaping and visual impact assessment has moved on in 2 years, and I feel it needs doing again. And the report on IV, I think it's L1, LA, states the effect on visual image is substantial. And I feel that a buffer zone is needed around the Red Deep side, rather than just landscaping. Highway safety and the is all a bit vague in there. It says potentially support a reduction, potentially support a speed reduction, potentially support a new bus service coming in. Well, that's up to the bus company whether they'll do that now. I'm a little surprised it's in there. And in terms of the equality, I am aware, living not far from the site, about the amount of already green area lost space, including the reeds on the brook side of the development, which were absolutely decimated by the developer. And I feel the ecology survey is outdated. Comments about badgers, I know there's turtle doves on there, and the area's got waterfowls. It's 2 years out of date now, and I felt that needs doing again. I would ask that the TPOs are put on the trees so they can't be moved prior to any development, because I've got real concerns with the way the reeds went, and that would be the way the trees would go before it came back to this committee. I'm aware of what is being proposed in terms of the neighbourhood centre, but would hope it would not be at the detriment of the current 2 centres in the areas. The highway conditions, and you said about straightening out, could that be conditioned so it is done before the development starts, bearing in mind we've said about the lorries only coming in one way and if there's a bend in the road. I wasn't sure where the roads led up to in terms of the quarry, and I don't know whether there's anything you could show me in terms of that, because obviously the quarry is on Gypsy Lane, and I'm just not sure where the 2 openings into the site would be in relation to the quarry site. That's all, Chair, thank you.
Points to come back on with consultation and road improvements before. I think they're 2 improvements.
Yeah. Would you like to point out on there, Darren, where the 2 accesses are onto Gypsy Lane and where the quarry... Well, the quarry's actually off this map, it's down here. The access to the quarry is fairly close to the junction with Coventry Road. But that's where the new roundabout is, and that's where the other junction is. And the quarry is the other side. You see the access that goes up to what was the old Falklands Farm? Well, the quarry access is even to the west of that. And as regards the consultation, yes, you're correct that the consultation was carried out when the application was submitted, but that's the same for any application we've had for any length of time. There hasn't been any great changes to it that required us to carry out any further consultation.
Councillor Longdon.
Back to my county council days when the bridge on Gypsy Lane was given a 7.5 tonne rating, which I believe was merely to deal, or only to deal, with the quarry traffic. And I'm pretty sure that the rating is higher than that. So I don't know if that needs checking or not. But if other traffic's going to be coming down there, possibly needs to be checking, especially if it's a bus, maybe, I don't know. So that needs to be taken in consideration. It's good to see, after all these years, that the road may be straightened slightly. But coming down from the quarry, people put their foot down. Without those bends, they're going to keep their foot down. And it's interesting for me to hear the county officer saying to put a speed limit on. But you're very careful not to say what the speed limit would be. And personally, I think it should be 30 miles an hour, especially coming down there. But the county council's policy is that they won't put a 30 mile an hour speed limit on a road which has fields on the side, except if it's Bulkington Road, going between Whitestone and Bulkington. For some reason that seems to be exempt. Everywhere else seems to be it applied a 40 mile an hour limit at least. And I know that for a fact because I've been trying for years, and so have the county councillors and councillors in our area, trying to get something done with Ansley Road. And there's been point blank refusal. You go from 50 to 30 to 30 to 40, 40 to 30 to 50. It's a nonsense. And if we're going to do the same on this road, it's going to be very, very dangerous. So I hope he's listening, and I hope he's going to take it back that we want a 30 mile an hour limit on that road, because anything else is going to be absolutely awful.
There was 2 points, I think, is about the bridge weight and also the speed element along there once the road's altered.
Say a speed limit was because the proposal for the access arrangements and straightening out of Gypsy Lane needs to go through a design process and technical approval. And that process will set the speed because we have to work with Warwickshire Police. And it's Warwickshire Police who actually enforce our speed limits across the county and tell us what we can have and what we can't have in terms of enforceable. And they require us to use all our engineering tools before they will then use speed enforcement measures. That's the reason why at the moment we have this policy where we have 40 miles per hour with fields on one side of the road. This is slightly different because it will be designed, therefore there will be an element where we might be able to design it for 30 miles per hour, but the whole of Gypsy Lane will not go to 30 miles per hour. It would only literally be that section. But I can't guarantee that would happen. It's down to the design works at present, and that will be something that will come through the application in terms of the conditions for the access arrangements. In terms of the weight limit was there for the quarry. At the moment, there's no proposal to change that limit. The buses we perceive would come in through the residential area, loop round and come back out again, because there's nothing actually that they would serve further down Gypsy Lane towards Coventry Road. And as you heard from Councillor Conticore, if we get the footway cycleway and over the turnover bridge, you can actually then get onto the Coventry Road, which has a good bus corridor within it as well. So we feel there's sufficient provision at the moment.
Okay, thank you. I did have my own name down, and I just wanted to be absolutely certain on something, and it's to do with the difference of opinion in regard to the SIL contributions. So the two that are listed as NBC Parks and NBBC Sports Development, and I want to be sure that they are still part of our request to the developers if we're looking at granting this permission. And I say, sorry, have I not explained myself very well? Are they still included in this? Because obviously the applicant has not, one has not fully accepted and one has not accepted to be considered compliant with the SIL. What is the officer's opinion of that? Is that still included in our request?
I think I understand. As regards the sports development funding, which is set out in the table on 67, we have requested those of the developer, but the developer considers that they're not SIL compliant and has suggested that they won't pay those. As regards the parks provision, there is a hierarchy of provision and monies. And just to answer Councillor Watkins' question earlier, it was Matt that replied to response. So it's not just parks, it was for the countryside as well. An element of that contribution is for a destination parks. And our destination parks are Riversley, Whittleford and Bedworth Miners Welfare. And the developer or the agent for the owner considers that they're not SIL compliant, and so it's only that amount of that contribution that he's not willing to pay. That sort of answers Councillor Shepherd's question earlier, because everything else on the table on page 67 and goes on to 68 has all been accepted by the developer. So there's parts of the first two items on there and they're broken down on page 69, but the rest of the items on there have been agreed by the developer and will be put into the legal agreement.
You see, those, from my point of view, those first two items give me an issue. And I understand that we shouldn't be seen as selling an application to gain monetary value or whatever for other things. But I find it difficult to understand why underneath that, if you look at the George Eliot Hospital Trust, etc., NHS Joint Health Request, they're not a problem. Yet the first two are, yet both of those first two items provide a good means for the health and well-being of the residents of this borough. And so I've got a serious issue over that if people are suggesting that's to be removed. Excuse me. The agent, when he was talking, actually said that we should actually approve this application without hesitation. Yes, he's possibly right in regards that it's now a part of the adopted local plan, but I'm not going to make any decision without hesitation, otherwise there'd be no point of us being here. And that gives me a serious cause to hesitate, those first two items. The agent also described the plan as being south of Nuneaton, which it is, but I would suggest to you it's probably nearer to Bedworth than it is to Nuneaton. And anybody that will be living in that area will be, at some point, using our destination parks and facilities. And so, I'm sorry, I can't agree to the removal of those. If you're telling me that's the case, then I will vote against the application. But if they're still part of it, I'm happy for it, except for it when it comes back with the detail. Okay. The recommendation, which has been moved and seconded, is to grant planning permission subject to a legal agreement and the conditions printed. Although...
Just John voting for. So, yeah, but are them conditions? Are they still being put in, or are they not?
Well, on page 67, on the parks contribution, there's a contribution requested of the developer of £946,206.61, of which, on page 69, it says that the developer is unwilling to pay £237,220.25. So they are willing to pay 700 and... Yeah. in regards to the parks contribution, and that would be agreed and within the legal agreement. If you look at the sports development contribution on the 67, that's for £1,357,637, and again, if you look over on page 69, that's the whole amount that the developer has suggested he's not willing to pay. And just to clarify what Councillor Hancock said, one of the reasons is, whilst there are overarching policies within this local plan to cover both contributions towards sport and countryside and open space, this specific policy doesn't actually mention them in its key development principles. It does mention the things like the George Eliot Hospital Trust and the infrastructure for Warwickshire County Council. All the other strategic policies do include sports provision and open space provision. So that's just to clarify that's part of the reason why the applicant is suggesting he's not willing to pay those.
I'm going to take Councillor Tromans and I'm going to move to the vote because I was at the voting stage. And Councillor Tromans.
Thank you, Officer said. Is it a simple matter for us to be able to amend it then and include it in the policy? No. Would we be able to defend on appeal? Your opinion, please.
That's difficult. It's HS2 for sport and NE2 for open space that would give us some comfort in being able to defend it at appeal. However, the developer is correct, as I've just said, that particular strategic policy for that site does not include those, whereas all the others do. So that would certainly weaken any case we would have at appeal.
Right, let's see where we're going with it. The recommendation which has been moved and seconded is to grant planning permission subject to a legal agreement and the conditions printed. All those in favour of that? And against?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
6.
6. Sorry, 6.
And abstentions?
1 abstention.
Somebody not?
Yeah, there's 10 of them.
There's 10.
Because June, yeah, that only makes 9, 3 and 6.
Oh, June's got that. Right, okay.
That's lost, June.
Yeah. The recommendation is lost.
So,
At this point, we need a different proposal being put forward.
do you wish to defer for further discussions with the applicant?
That's an alternative.
Yeah, thanks for that. Normally I'll cross my arms and wait for somebody to come up with something. But I think probably because, you know, the land's identified, we kind of know where we're going on it. The difference seems to be on a particular couple of points. Can I move that we defer the item to allow further discussions between the developer and the planning officers? Is that seconded? Okay, all those in favour of that? And against? And abstention? Okay, so that's carried. So that's deferred for those discussions.
Window. That's Councillor Tandy back.
Yeah.
Oh, she declared, didn't it? Yeah. Okay, so that takes us on to... Where are we? Item number 5, Nuneaton Roof Truss Limited.
This application is for a containerised biomass boiler facility incorporating 3 biomass boilers, 3 flue stacks, 2 fuel stores and plant room at Unit 2 Weddington Terrace. The existing building is a large industrial unit and the proposed development will be located at the rear of the main building in the service yard. Weddington Terrace is an employment site with a mix of B-use classes and D-use classes. The boundary of the site is mostly made up of high-density shrubbery and 2-metre-high metal fencing. There have been 5 objections from 5 addresses and 3 objections with no addresses provided. Notwithstanding a number of objections, this application is being reported to committee at the request of Councillor Kondaka. The key issues in determining this application are the environmental impacts, the impact on residential amenity and the impact on visual amenity. Paragraph 154 of the National Planning Policy Framework states that when determining planning applications on renewable and low carbon development, local planning authorities should approve the application if its impacts are or can be made acceptable. Additionally, policy BE2 of the Borough Plan, renewable and low carbon energy, refers to renewable and low carbon energy. It states that schemes which introduce renewable and low carbon technologies, such as biomass, will be approved, including will be approved. The proposal seeks to use a waste product from the on-site manufacturing process of roof trusses to be used as biomass fuel to heat the premises, which in turn would help sustain and grow the existing business and offer a more sustainable alternative to non-renewable sources of energy. Environmental health officers were consulted and have assessed the applicant's air quality impact assessment. Environmental officers agree with the assessment's conclusion that the increase in nitrous dioxide and particulates and carbon monoxide from the 3 biomass boilers well below and can be screened as insignificant at local sensitive receptors. Furthermore, the assessment is in accordance with the guidance provided by the Environmental Agency, and environmental officers also agree that there will be negligible air pollution impacts for nitrous oxide and particulates at nearby residential properties, and any associated risk to human health will be similarly low, subject to meeting conditions in relation to the Clean Air Act 1993. It is therefore considered that the proposed conditions will make the proposal acceptable and is in accordance with paragraph 154 of the NPPF and policy BE2 of the Borough Plan. With regards to residential amenity, the closest residential properties to the proposal are located over 150 metres away. Therefore, there will be no impact on any residential properties in relation to loss of privacy, light, or having an oppressive sense of enclosure. With regards to visual amenity, with the exception of the fuel stacks, the majority of the buildings are to be located to the rear of the existing industrial units and will not be exposed to public views. The stacks are proposed to be 12 metres in height, roughly a similar height to a 3-storey house. Therefore, whilst the stacks may be visible from Weddington Terrace and Weddington Road, they will not be detrimental to the street scene. Moreover, the proposal is located in an industrial setting, often associated with having a less sensitive visual impression and a low visual amenity landscapes. As such, it is considered that the proposal is in accordance with policy BE3 of the local plan and section 8 of the residential design guide. The NPPF and policy DS1 of the Borough Plan promote a presumption in favour of sustainable development. As such, decisions should be made in line with an up-to-date development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. The Borough Plan has recently been adopted and is therefore up to date. Furthermore, the applicant has demonstrated that there will be no detrimental impact to human health and the environment or visual amenity to the street scene. For these reasons, it is recommended to committee to approve the application subject to conditions on the agenda and addendum. Thank you.
Thanks, Darren. Councillor Condacon.
Thank you. Which was documents 11 and 12. There is a detailed map which was only given to me an hour ago. I actually saw it on Friday. It was produced on the 12th of June and kept secret to me. This map shows the pollution fallout, and what Darren says about impact on residential locations doesn't apply to the industrial site right underneath the stack, where we have Nuneaton Gymnastics Club, and we also on the corner have Second Chance Furniture, which is now the hospice shop. I really ask we actually do a site visit to the site and actually also take along the air pollution map, because that's really key to see which areas are in the red line where the pollution is actually really significant. This is an industrial unit. The power of these heating units is 500 kilowatts. That's the same as 500 one-bar electric fires. We have no problem with people using biomass sensibly. Having one biomass boiler would provide more than enough heat for a well-insulated industrial unit. Instead, this firm seems to be gaming the renewable heat incentive by installing 3 biomass burners and burning 3 tonnes of wood a day in what is a very sensitive area. This is actually very low lying by the river anchor. It's lower than the railway station. If you're on platform 5 and 6 of the railway station, you're well above the level of the industrial estate. You'll just see these stacks rising up, and you will get, if you're on platforms 4 and 5, the pollution coming across. There is an issue with this, and the environmental health officer has not given me these maps until this weekend, and we also have an issue with site 6. If you read the environmental documents, there's receptors, how much pollution is at each site, and it misses out site 6. If you look at it, it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. Site 6 is Nuneaton Gymnastics, and I do not think we should approve this application until we've actually gone through this pollution data and asked the applicant how much pollution is at Nuneaton Gymnastics, at the front door. If you look at the pollution maps as well, you see they contour around the buildings. Actually, the buildings are actually presenting a barrier to the pollution going up the stack and down into the industrial estate. We need it properly modelled, and we actually need some care taken, because there's an awful lot wrong with this. I can't discuss it in 3 minutes. There's a PM 2.5 issue. Yeah, we have 3 tonnes of wood being burnt rather than 1 tonne. If we had 1 tonne of wood being burnt, it produces a certain impact. 3 tonnes is well over the top for an enclosed area, very low lying, and the modelling doesn't take account of all the height gain. If you look at Weddington, you go up the Weddington Road, where my residents live, they are higher than this site. So if the wind's blowing from the southwest, it will blow it onto my residents. And when the wind's blowing the other way, it will blow this pollution across the platforms of Nuneaton Station. Thank you.
Michelle Condical.
And in the report it says BET2. This policy states that schemes to introduce renewable and low carbon technologies such as biomass will be approved. You can't just have a blanket, we will approve these things. They need to be in the right places and doing the right things. We are in a climate emergency. I think that's been acknowledged. We haven't had a motion actually here at this council, but all the surrounding councils have, and I don't think anyone's denying it now. So it makes it even more imperative that we evaluate these types of application fully. We haven't got enough information here. It's unknown, the balance between what's happening now and what happens with the biomass burner. What happens to the ash? What currently, any of the spare wood chips and things, what is happening to those? Are they being burnt? Are they being chipped? Where are they going? Keith already alluded to the fact of, that it's huge. It's far more than seems to be necessary to heat this area. In terms of the assessments from the environmental health officer saying it's okay, well, in early applications on Western Hall, the committee said that the environmental health people had got it wrong, and I believe they've got it wrong on this one. The air quality assessment itself says that there will be a moderate impact on air quality within the site boundary, and that cannot be acceptable for workers at the premises. There's not much open space in that area for it to just disperse. Things go up the chimney, but they will have to come down somewhere. And that is in areas like the Old Hinkley Road, which has massive amount of traffic and increasing amount of traffic, and where the pollution is already at a very, very dubious level, what have you. The NPPF paragraph 120 says, to prevent unacceptable risks from pollution and land instability, planning policies and decisions should ensure that new development is appropriate for its location. I'm not sure we've seen enough evidence that it is. It may be, but we haven't got enough information to do that. And the effects, including cumulative effects of pollution on health, the natural environment or general amenity, should be taken into account. And I don't believe that the cumulative impacts of pollution on health in this area have been taken into account, and they will be too great on this proposed development. The site's close to the AQMA, which having more and more traffic coming, it doesn't seem to have any account of the raised platforms at the railway station, which are going to be very close and at a not dissimilar level things. So there are a lot of issues that I don't think we know enough about to actually say yes, this is a good thing. As I say, if it was smaller and we had more information, then maybe yes. But are these going to be second-hand ones? Are they going to be clean?
Thank you, Mrs. Condical. Are there any points? Mrs. Pullen.
And have a very real concern about the impact of 3 biomass burners that will have on the environment. It's argued that these developments should be approved as they generate energy, reduce the need for transport, but I would argue differently. First of all, the construction of 3 burners seems excessive. It could be the burners, the business could extend for others to fully use the facility. If so, it would have a detrimental impact on the traffic, on the noise, on the environment, as we heard, as well as on other businesses, residents. And although the environmental report also states that it will only have a small impact on the legal air pollution limit, legal air pollution limit is relative and it's already getting very high in Nuneaton. I believe that the underlying continuous noise will be detrimental to us, specifically as the working hours are not defined. My own son works from till 11 p.m. and all weekends, so that's not been defined either. Nowhere has the problem seen about the ash from the burning of the wood. It's not been fully investigated. Where would it be stored? What would prevent it from going into the air? Where would it be removed to? Where would it be disposed of? I think these are quite important if you're going to put an industrial thing in a very small area. I'd also, it would affect business users and the rail station, and it's not a good advert for our city, our town, Nuneaton. And could I ask if there's been any alternative methods that they've looked into that could be increase their own revenue, such as making the wood chippings into something else? In conclusion, I have a problem with 3 biomass burners. 1 could be understandable if they're not going to use their offcuts for reusable products. The air and noise pollution will increase if they increase their business to other people. Transport is not going to be decreased. It will get worse because of the people be coming in and out, and they have to get rid of the ash, etc. And I'm not sure whether anybody's visited the site to see the impact that it could have on the station and on people in the area. That's much as my little gabble can do. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. Are there any clarification? No. Tom Cox.
The biomass boiler facility will be located on an existing site within an industrial estate. The facility will heat the existing factory on the application site, which will contribute towards cost savings and improving the overall efficiency of the business. The development as proposed is supported by national planning policy in that cost savings and improvements in the efficiency of the business will help to meet the aspirations of the business model and secure approximately 35 local jobs. The biomass boiler facility will make use of wood chip, which would otherwise be transported off-site. The development will offer an alternative to the use of oil, gas or electric in more conventional heating systems. There is currently no heating within the factory. National planning policy directs the planning system to support the transition to a low-carbon future in a changing climate, which includes low-carbon energy and associated infrastructure. The development will be functional and fit for purpose. Whilst not innovative in design terms, the choice and type of materials proposed will respect, reflect and reinforce the existing industrial estate within Nuneaton. The Council's planning policy team raised no objection to the planning application. The applicant appointed a technical expert with over 30 years' experience in relation to air quality, and the planning application is supported by a comprehensive air quality assessment. The results of the assessment conclude that there will be no unacceptable adverse impacts on air quality as a result of the development, which includes impacts upon local sensitive receptors, nearby residential properties, ecological habitats, and on the nearby air quality management area. The Council's Environmental Health Officer agrees with the conclusions reached by the applicant's air quality consultant and raises no objection to the development. In conclusion, the development is fully compliant with the development plan and with national planning policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any points? No? Darren, anything to come back on? In which case, to enable debate to take place, can I move the recommendation, which is to grant planning permission subject to a legal agreement and the conditions printed? Is that seconded? Thank you. Any member? Councillor Tromans.
All of our paperwork absolutely correct and in order. This is shown as planning item number 50362880 WE, Weddington. I believe it's St Nicholas.
I don't have a borough ward map on me. That's automatically generated from our links to the
all right,
LLPG mapping system that we use.
From what I was given on the last map and what it says on the internet, it's supposed to be St Nicholas, but
It'd be difficult because there aren't any residential properties down there.
The residential aren't, but that bit is apparently in my ward. So I think we need to obviously make sure, otherwise we could be challenged whichever way the committee decides. I do appreciate, obviously, Councillor Condacor appears as ward councillor pretty much wherever these applications are, but I do think we need to be correct on these things. I would like to go out and see for myself and have it explained to me the 6-7 air quality sensors and what the readings would be for each in that area, because I am mindful that there is an awful lot of children that go to the gymnastics school there. Young children, and I wouldn't want to think that they are, while they are in there, there's air conditioning that's sucking in all sorts of pollution from outside or whatever. Now, hopefully we can all be satisfied that it is safe and for the workers, and it's not just a question that it's within legal maximums, but actually there isn't anything really material difference or detriment that's being caused, especially to children. That does worry me considerably. So I would like to ask if we could have a site visit to go out there and be walked through the air quality issue with the appropriate officer from environmental health, with the maps that apparently they've got and the 6 or 7 sensors that we used for modelling that have been referred to this evening. Thank you, Chair.
I will be supporting this application for a number of reasons, really. One is I do think it's actually an innovative idea, and it's good to see people investing within the borough with such innovative ideas. The nearest residential is 150 metres away. It's reducing fossil fuels usage. The transport for taking the waste wood away is obviously going to be less. And if you're burning 3 tonne of wood into ashes, then obviously the transport to take any ashes away is going to be a lot less than taking 3 tonne of wood away. So there's a lot of things speaking for this. I do accept that there may be something in the air quality, and perhaps could put a condition on planting some more trees or something to offset that. But Warwickshire County Council should be monitoring any air quality issues they have. That's not for this borough to take into account. So if Councillor Condacor thinks that there's an air quality problem there, perhaps he could use some of his delegated money to put an assessment in there. So I will be speaking in favour of it. Well, I am speaking in favour of this, and it's good to see somebody investing within this borough. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Longdon.
I think the issue on this is there's been a couple of issues raised about ash. Well, ash will be taken away from the site, presumably, and it will probably be utilised in what the other burners or the other incinerators around the area use, and that's to go into road materials as a rule. The one up the A5 is pronounced for that. I forget. We haven't had a look, and it's very good. and the one at the A5 actually puts about 3 grams of pollutants into the air per burn, which is tremendous. It's absolutely incredible. They're trying to reduce that as well. In this case, a lot of people are actually using wood burners in their own homes. There's a guy just down the road from me and it stinks something terrible. I don't know what he burns on it, but it stinks something terrible when it comes out of the chimney. I did think about reporting him to environmental health, but he's bigger than me, so I don't want to upset him too much. But the issues around all that, there's no restrictions on those, and this is just a bigger version of what the household, the residential ones are. And they are supposed to be controlled. You're only supposed to burn particular types of timber in them. But I don't think anybody takes any notice of that. And next door, he still gets his coal supply, so he's burning the stuff as well. So the whole thing, I think, can be of benefit to the area. And if environmental health have got no problems with it, I certainly haven't got any problems with it because I'm not that much of an expert on that. And I'm happy to take their word for it. And the issue, I think, can be settled tonight without a site visit. It would be the visual impact, I suppose, that would be questionable. But even that has not raised its ugly head too much. I think the objections come from burning. As far as I'm concerned, I think that's the way forward. I don't think we've got much choice now. We're going to have to burn stuff and get heat from it and create electricity. Like I say, the one at the A5 puts 39 megawatts to the grid all the time. So that's a tremendous thing. And I think rather than landfill, and I'm embarrassed about Judkins, I'm leaving a really, really bad environmental health risk for my kids and grandkids. It's really disgusting, the leachate that's still coming out of there. So I'd rather see it go up the chimney, providing it's safe and controlled like these things are. And I think enough work's been done on this with regard to the emissions to make it perfectly acceptable.
I just wanted to add to Councillor Longdon has said, as a layperson, I don't have the technical knowledge about the emissions suggested, similar to about the air quality in the area. And I know they're often challenged, and quite rightly so, but I rely on the knowledge of the officers that we employ, and indeed other experts that lend themselves to that. This on paper at least appeared to me quite a radical way of dealing with a way of disposing of waste produced by something. And I can see the benefits to it, and I would like to think that modern technology would help scrub this stuff out, and as has been said, the ash and stuff will be disposed in a responsible manner. However, I am conscious that there is concern in that area about air quality. In fact, we've cleaned it up really because of that old site going and the new Audi being put on there, which took away the previous problems there. There's contention about the air quality with the traffic. And to that event, I'd like to add, if the committee agree to it, a further condition. And that condition would be that no materials to be used other than produced on site. And I say that deliberately because the agent's telling us that it's going to reduce that stuff that used to have to be taken away. What we don't want is, if they're not producing enough stuff to burn, for them to start bringing stuff in. I hope that seems logical, people. And does anybody object to that condition being added? No. Would it be an acceptable condition to be added? I should have. Okay. So with that additional condition, the recommendation which has been moved and seconded is to grant planning permission subject to a legal agreement and the conditions printed. All those in...
Sorry, it's just the conditions, there isn't a legal agreement.
Right. Scrub the legal agreement. I'm told that's not...
on the agenda. Sorry.
Right, okay. Right, it's recommended to grant planning permission with the conditions printed and the additional one. All those in favour of that?
7, 8, 9.
And against?
1.
And abstentions?
1. That's carried.
Okay, thank you very much. That's approved. We can move on to item number 6, the land between 10 and 12 Roxburgh Road.
This application is for the erection of 8 flats in 2 two-storey blocks and includes the demolition of the existing garages on land between 10 and 12 Roxburgh Road. All of the flats are to be 1 bedroom and vehicle access is proposed off Roxburgh Road. The site is currently a garage site with rear elevations facing Roxburgh Road. Presently, there is a grassed area between the garages and Roxburgh Road. To the south of the application site is an area of open land that contains a number of trees that add good visual amenity to the area. There is a footpath that runs along the northern boundary of the site through to Marston Lane. There have been 9 objections from 9 addresses to the original plans, and a petition with 21 signatories and comments of objection, and a petition with 60 signatories with no comments, with a further 3 objections to the amended plans. The key issues are the principle of residential development, impact on residential amenity, impact on visual amenity, highway safety, and the impact on ecology. The MPPF states that planning of policies and decisions should give substantial weight to the value of using suitable brownfield land within settlements for homes and other identified needs. The site is a brownfield site that is currently underused, as 11 of the 9 garages are not in use. It is considered that the site would therefore be a sustainable use of land in a predominantly residential area, with the added benefit of providing 8 affordable and much needed housing units, which are also to be owned and maintained by Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council. Policy B3 of the Borough Plan states that all development proposals must contribute to local distinctiveness and character and have regard to residential amenity. This policy is further supported by the Council's Residential Design Guide. With regards to Marston Lane, to protect privacy, the Residential Design Guide requires a minimum 20 metres separation distance between the existing ground floor and first floor habitable room windows and the proposed ground floor and first floor habitable room windows. The plans show the distance to be 21.5 metres and 22.5 metres. Furthermore, the Residential Design Guide requires a separation gap of 7 metres from the proposed habitable room windows and neighbouring private amenity space. Both of these distances are well within the recommended distance. With regards to Roxburgh Road, the nearest properties to the proposed development are numbers 10 and 12, and these are 23 metres and 26 metres away and are in no way impacted. In relation to within the site, distance standards are also met. There is not a huge amount of outside space provided for the proposed flats. However, this is not uncommon in flat developments. Additionally, existing residents with access to the garage site will still have that access available to them after development is completed. Additionally, plots 5 and 8 have have habitable room windows which serve kitchen and living room areas on both the ground and first floor. These would be set between 17 and 18 metres away from numbers 11 and 13 Roxburgh Road, 2 to 3 metres short of the guidance. However, the distance is over a public highway and the residential design guide allows for greater flexibility in these situations. With regards to visual amenity, the proposed flats are set closer to the road than the existing properties along Roxburgh Road. However, it is considered that the 8 new dwellings, which will provide a cohesive group of properties, it could also be argued that the siting is not dissimilar to the existing pattern of development. It is also considered that it's a gradual step as plots 1 to 4 are set slightly further forward than number 12, and then plots 5 to 8 are set slightly further forward again. As the plans show here. And it steps closer to the highway here and then steps back. This is number 12. On this basis, it is not considered that the proposed development would appear to be so significantly out of character or overly prominent to warrant a recommendation of refusal. It is also important to take into account the existing garage site. The rear of the garages face Roxburgh Road are not in a particular pleasant feature of the street scene. These here. The garages to the northern part of the site already project close to the highway and past the front of number 12. It is considered that the proposed development would be an improvement in the terms of visual amenity. The MPPF outlines a need to minimise the impact of the proposed developments on biodiversity, as well as contributing to and enhancing this where possible. It particularly highlights the need to consider the impact on ecological networks, protected wildlife, priority species and priority habitats. There is a mature tree on the site that is to be retained, together with trees to the west. Tree over here, further west over here. These will not be removed, but where necessary, the side limbs that cause obstruction to access road will be removed. A condition would also be added requiring a landscaping scheme to be submitted. Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council Parks have no objection to this. Of the 19 garages on site, 11 are currently empty and not being used. Of the 8 that are in use by existing residents, the applicant has confirmed that those residents will be offered alternatives. To encourage sustainable travel, the ground floor of each block contains an area for cycle storage. With regard to the new development, a total of 10 spaces are proposed that would consist of 1 space for each flat plus 2 visitor spaces. The parking spaces will be managed under a residence permit system. Warwickshire County Council Highways have no objection to this. Taking into account the above assessment, it is consequently considered that the proposed development would be in accordance with the development plan and other policies with the MPPF. Furthermore, there are no material considerations or adverse impacts which indicate that the application should be refused. It is therefore in accordance with the presumption in favour of sustainable development and recommended to a committee to approve the application, subject to conditions on the agenda. Thank you.
Thanks, Darren. Mr. Prince.
Plans remove what is an essential amenity to many of the immediate residents of off-street parking which they have had for many years, some up to 25. No consultation or alternative currently being offered to the tenant, and the next set of garages have already been earmarked for 2 houses, with planning permission approved a few weeks ago. Due to the loss of the garage amenity and no realistic alternative, the residents will have to park on a road which already struggles with on-street parking, which is below the recommended width. This particular concern as the grass area is currently used by variety of residents for recreational activities, and it's a concern children will run out between the parked cars and not be seen, especially as no private areas have been provisioned for in the flats. It's also a concern that the provisioned parking is very minimal, is contrary to the design guide as it is at the rear, has no logical vehicle approach to the properties, and doesn't have sufficient parking space for the visitors, which will lead to further parking issues on the road and make it harder to get an ambulance down, let alone a fire engine. These issues can already be seen at the opposite end where the new houses have been built and have better parking provision. There is also a concern people will just drive across or park on the grassed area to the south, especially with the updated plans and the length of the access road. Another concern is the proposed houses aren't to the recommended separation distance of 20 metres, which is below the national of 22 metres, and are set back only 2 metres from the road, whereas the surrounding houses are 7 metres, giving the proposed flats an overbearing nature on the road scene. Due to how close the flats are to the road, it will also reduce visibility down the road, again reducing the road safety. There is also a significant height difference between the current houses and the proposed, which gives the impression that the current houses are 3 storeys with the current elevation and distances. From a personal position, I find the position proposed for the one set of waste bins to be unacceptable. It is right outside my property with no screening to hide it from my lounge view. There's also a concern that the existing hedges, trees will be damaged during the process around the wild area. This attracts a significant amount of wildlife from bats to foxes, and there's a concern that this will be disturbed during the building process. Lastly, I'd like to see how the client nor designer have done any consultation with the residents and have even trespassed and damaged people's property during surveys. When approached on site visits, they haven't been willing to consider any proposals and have been outright rude. Although we prefer to retain the garage, if a development is needed, we'd like to have a minimal negative impact, which is why we have put forward alternatives. But these seem to have been just ignored, and we believe this is due to an ulterior motive for a subsequent planning application if they can get this through to substandard requirements. As a whole, there seems to be no thought gone into the local conditions, residents, and it feels more like they are trying to squeeze as much as possible onto an insufficient area.
Thank you. Any points of clarification? No? Mrs. Riley. That's it.
Number 13, directly facing the site for 17 years. I live there with my husband and our 14-year-old daughter. We have a young granddaughter who comes to visit, so understandably, loss of privacy is of great concern to us. The distance between our living and bedroom windows to those of the flats is short of what is considered a reasonable distance. We will therefore suffer a loss of privacy. The narrow road does not alter the level of privacy, it does not obscure the view from across the road and is not lined with plantation. The occupants of the flats will be able to see quite clearly into our private living room and bedroom windows and us into theirs. Whilst you may be able to screen the ground floor windows with plantation, our bedroom windows will face not 1 but 4 living room windows of the flats. We do not have a planted front garden offering screening. We have stood across the road and can quite easily see inside our living room. Are we to keep our curtains permanently closed? We would ask whether it is possible to adjust the plans to afford us a 20-metre distance. We have asked if parking bays 3 to 7 could be located at the front, as shown in the plan attached to my letter of the 27th of June. This would then achieve a distance we would be happy with. Unfortunately, we have received no response. This is the layout with the newer houses at the junction of Roxburgh Road and Leyland Road, where the road is much more dangerous because of the junction. The tenants of the flats will have visitors, of more concern overnight visitors. This will result in on-street parking as close to the front doors of the flats as possible. This will result in existing residents being forced to park elsewhere, away from their homes. As a result, we will suffer a loss of amenity which we have enjoyed for many years. I am concerned that it was intimated to me that parking at the rear was preferred, as this then allows for additional space for on-street parking by visitors whilst we are trying to keep our roads safe. This would make it difficult for existing residents to reverse off our driveways, negotiating parked vehicles on both sides of the roads. Our neighbours at number 15 will have difficulty moving their caravan off their drive. An increase in on-street parking will cause obstruction to road users and emergency vehicles, as evidenced at the junction of Roxburgh and Leyland Road. The applicant is working to very tight space constraints. It is our view that they are trying to squeeze the development into too small a space, regardless, it seems, of what impact this will have on existing residents. The occupants of the flats will have very limited outdoor space, and with respect, the open area of grass adjacent is not a park, and congregation on this land has the potential to cause noise and nuisance. My neighbours are elderly, widowed or of ill health, and have all resided happily in their homes in excess of 45 and 50 years. It is the existing residents who will have to live with the development. We would ask that you please give consideration to our objections and the effect the plans in their current format will have upon the enjoyment of our homes.
Thank you. Are there any points of clarification? John Roberts.
I don't want to excessively repeat items based on Pine Tree. This is a very similar scheme. It offers the same modern methods of construction, or addresses the same affordable housing needs. There are a number of existing residents who have access rights across the site, and these have been protected throughout the design, therefore does potentially limit the design that we have on the site. The area of open space adjacent to the development to the south will remain untouched. The large mature tree to the south of plot 7 and 8 will be retained. The trees along the western boundary, it's our intention to retain these, but they will be cut back to enable vehicular access. The area is developed currently as a garage site. It's obviously has hard standings, tarmac and buildings on there, so the effect on wildlife in what we're producing will be fairly minimal. The site layout has been redesigned to ensure proximity to the new dwellings and existing dwellings is within a reasonable distance. Proposed dwellings have considerably lower floor level than the road, and the dwellings opposite are in turn higher, so there is a level difference between our properties and the properties adjacent. The layout has been amended in line with residents' concerns about proximity. We have drawn plots 5 to 9 back, just to clarify the distances between our plots and the highway, because the previous resident was incorrect. Plots 1 to 4 range between 3.3 metres and 3.5 metres. Plots 5 to 8 are 3 metres to 3.8 metres. The houses themselves will be clad in half brick, half render, which is in keeping with the other dwellings, which are generally red brick or tile hanging in the proximity. The site itself is self-sufficient in terms of parking. The units are one-bed units. There is one allocated space with 2 additional spaces for visitors, and as been mentioned, there will be a residence permit system. The layout has been addressed in terms of residential amenity and found to comply with the policy standards in the design guide. The officers conclude the layout is acceptable, and we trust this will make a positive contribution to the housing supply, and we trust you will therefore support the officer's recommendation.
Points of clarification? No. Anything to come back at this stage? No, Catherine? Okay, to enable debate to take place, can I move the recommendation, which is to grant planning permission subject to the conditions printed? Is that seconded? Okay, thank you. Any member? Councillor Watkins.
I do know some of the objectors, and I did go to a meeting, but I didn't say anything at the meeting. Obviously, I'm going to be speaking in favour of this because I am a portfolio holder for this as well, so I'll find myself a bit difficult here. I'd just like to point out a few facts as well. These are council houses, they're not affordable houses. These are council houses, and we need to be building at least 50 council houses a year to just replace the ones that are up for right to buy. So we're still not getting anywhere near with this development site. We are meeting the gaps that are asked for by the MPPF. The officers have been working with the residents, and that is why we've ended up with a redesign of what was originally put forward. The concerns that the residents have got at the minute, we can have a look at some of them working forward. We can tweak a few things here and there. And in my opinion, this is only going to enhance the site rather than destroy it. The garages that are not used, and so I'll be hoping that this goes through tonight. Thank you.
Councillor Shepherd.
I would be interested to know where the alternative garage spaces have been made available to the residents who are in Roxburgh. There was a comment from planning policy that isn't in the document, so I'd be interested to know what that was. I do think this site is over-intensive. It doesn't fit in with the street scene. I mean, it's houses around there. There's no flats at all in that area. And I just don't think that it's in keeping with the character of the area. I've got a concern over the 9-foot shortfall and the quality of life for the residents living in those blocks when actually there's not much external space at all for the occupiers. So at this present moment in time, and that's I'll listen to all the members, but at this moment I can't support this application.
No? Any of those points that you wanted to... I think there was the distance thing, wasn't there? I see on the drawing that's almost 21 metres across the road. What is it on our design guidance?
20.
What?
Recommended is 20.
And this is 20.71 and 20.78, something like that. Yeah? Oh, sorry, I was under the impression people thought it was...
Yeah, the lower one is 17.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I apologise. Yeah, the lower one is... Yeah. So it's...
It's a slight infringement on the...
Yeah. 3 metres.
It's across a public road.
3 metres.
We do accept that.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? No? Okay, the recommendation, which has been moved and seconded, is to grant planning permission subject to the conditions printed. All those in favour?
1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7.
8, I think it was. Sorry, can you keep your hands up in favour?
Oh, sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yes, it is. Sorry, I can see you.
And against?
1, 2.
And abstentions?
1 abstention.
Okay, that's approved. So for now, if we skip item number 7, and there's no speaker on that, move on to item 8, Falklands Farm. Oh, we're still on. Oh, and sorry, just before I move on, so that can be sure, can I move suspension of standing orders to enable us to complete the business tonight? All those in favour of that?
That's carried.
Okay, thank you.
This is an outline application at Falklands Farm to include access for the redevelopment of the existing land for up to 92,904 square metres of B2 and B8 floor space, including associated engineering and ground modelling works, vehicular access, landscaping, sustainable drainage and car parking. Access is being considered at this stage and is proposed off Coventry Road, with Gypsy Lane used as an emergency access only. The 26-hectare site is predominantly agricultural land, with part of the site comprising a former hard rock quarry that has been restored by infilling. To the northern boundary there is dense vegetation with Griff Brook beyond. Coventry Canal is to the east and Gypsy Lane to the south and Griff Quarry beyond. To the west is Griff Caravan Site, the A444 and Griff Roundabout, together with Bermuda Industrial Estate and Business Park. The site also includes the existing Falkland Farm and associated buildings. There have been 2 objections from two addresses. Nonetheless, this application is being reported to the committee at the request of Councillors Barry Lambden and Councillor Joe Shepherd. The key issues are the principle of development, impact on residential amenity, employment growth and opportunities, impact on visual amenity and landscape character, highway safety and accessibility, impact on ecology and planning obligations. The site was previously in the Greenbelt and has since been removed, along with other strategic sites under Policy DS7 of the Borough Plan. Policy DS6 of the Borough Plan refers to a number of sites that will be allocated for employment and associated infrastructure. A Falklands Farm is one such allocated site. Policy EMP1 sets out the strategic employment site and how it will be developed, using comprising use classes B1, B2 and B8. The site is currently an agricultural use, and using the agricultural land classification map, this area of the borough appears to be grade 4, which is a poor quality farmland. Policy EMP1 of the Borough Plan sets out key development principles for the site, including any proportionate transport improvements and highways improvements, the creation of cycle path links, provision for crossing of Coventry Canal to facilitate cycle usage, and a new access from Coventry Road. The expected form of development is also set out in Policy EMP1. An illustrated master plan, parameters plan and other supporting documentation have been submitted at this stage to show that the requirements of Policy EMP1 can be accommodated on the site. Therefore, it is considered that the principle of developing the site for employment uses has been established through the allocation of the site in the Borough Plan and the relevant policies within it. With regards to the impact on residential amenity, as this site is an outline application, layout and design of the site and buildings are not being considered at this stage. However, a noise assessment has been submitted with the application. Although as it is outlined, there are no details on prospective end users. Use and activity have been modelled as being occupied by B2 uses only, which does not give a worst case scenario. However, the noise assessment points out that the units would be occupied by a mix of B2 and B8 uses, many of which would generate much lower internal noise levels and less activity outside the units. All units have been modelled as operating on a 24-hour basis. This assessment has found that noise from the activity arising from the proposals is in accordance with the British Standards and World Health Organisation guidelines. And Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council Environmental Health were consulted and requested that consideration was given to the housing allocation under Policy HG3 of the Borough Plan, land north of Gypsy Lane, which was previously discussed under item 4. A supplementary noise assessment was carried out and submitted which showed the existing sources of noise to HSG3 are from the Griff Quarry and road traffic. It concluded that the noise from the proposed Falklands Farm scheme is not significant in the context of the existing noise sources and complies with guidance for both internal and external noise levels. Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council Environmental Health have no objection at this stage. The proposal has employment growth opportunities. The applicant has commissioned and submitted to the Council a social, economic and market need assessment which demonstrates that a strong economic case underpins this proposal. The proposed development could directly support between 1,578 and 1,664 full-time equivalent jobs across a range of sectors, including managerial, administration, sales and customer service roles. It is estimated that the proposed development could provide a direct contribution of some £50 million annually into the economy of Nuneaton and Bedworth area. There would also be indirect benefits estimated to be in the worth of an additional £14.5 million each year. With regards to impact on visual amenity and landscape character, the Borough Plan prepared several landscape character area documents. These documents assess the borough's landscape character and the capacity of the landscape to accommodate development. Volume 1 Landscape Character Assessment identifies the application area as the Nuneaton and Bedworth urban fringe character area and is more of a general assessment. The second document is more site-specific, with the application site falling within Parcel 3B. This states that the landscape within the parcel is in poor condition, with remnants of hedgerows and Falklands Farm forming detractions in the landscape. These factors combined with the presence of overhead power lines and views of Griff Quarry result in a less attractive landscape character area. A further landscape capacity study concluded that given the elevated ground of the site, the potential heights and massing of B8 units could impinge on the open countryside between Gypsy Lane and Marston Lane and the canal corridor and dominate the surroundings. Notwithstanding, the report does suggest recommendations for planning, building form and landscape mitigation, although it does not recommend a restriction in the height of any of the buildings. The applicant has also submitted a landscape and visual impact assessment, which highlights there would be some moderate adverse effects as a result of the development. However, the assessment also recommends mitigation that would reduce the visual impacts, which are consistent with the Council's landscape reports. Whilst it is clear that development of the site will inevitably have some impact on the landscape character of the area, it must be recognised that its present condition and character are poor, and that mitigation measures will provide landscape enhancements and reinforce existing character features. With regards to the impact on the highway safety, the applicant submitted a transport assessment which includes detailed modelling of the site access, which conform A transport assessment has been submitted with the application, which details modelling of the site access. It also proposed that emergency blue light access is provided from Gypsy Lane, utilising the existing vehicular access into the site. The county highways have been consulted and consider that the proposed signalised access arrangement is acceptable. They have requested a condition for the detailed design to be submitted prior to any works taking place on the site, and that the signalised junction will be implemented prior to the first occupation of any part of the development. Highways also consider that the core impact of the development is on the operation of the A444 corridor between the Ring Road in Nuneaton Town Centre and the M6 Junction 3. They have therefore requested Section 1 contribution of £1,920,000 towards highway infrastructure. £1,920,000 towards highway infrastructure improvements on the A444 corridor. The applicant has agreed to pay this contribution. Further to this, a range of schemes are proposed which would improve accessibility to and from the site by sustainable forms of transport and therefore reduce the reliance of the private car. For instance, the access road will be made wider than necessary to accommodate a 3-metre cycleway footpath on either side, and there will be provision of footway cycle paths within the site. A condition will be added that details shall be submitted showing the routes of all cycle paths and footways running through the site, and that all cycle paths shall be 3 metres wide and finished in tarmac. Other routes shall be 1.8 metres wide and also finished in tarmac. Provision is also made for a footway cycleway path over the Coventry Canal using the existing turnover bridge. The bridge which crosses the Coventry now is to be used as a strategic footpath connection between this site and the housing site previously discussed in item 4. The applicant has also agreed to the provision of a shared footway cycleway link of 3 metres between the site access and the A444 B411 signalised Griff roundabout junction, and to the upgrade of the bus stop infrastructure on Coventry Road in the form of a bus shelter. Both of these schemes will be delivered as part of the Section 278 works for the delivery of identified signalised access junction onto Coventry Road. With regards to the impact on ecology, the MPPF states that development should not have a negative impact on biodiversity. Whilst the proposals have sought to minimise impacts and maximise enhancements, including proposing robust buffers to boundary habitats and biodiverse suds areas adjacent to the canal, as far as practical, the proposals are likely to lead to a negative habitat biodiversity impact. As such, it is proposed to create a 2.2 hectare of permanent grassland habitat to the south-east of the site, adjacent to Wen Brook. Down here. To achieve a positive score. This is land that is in control of the applicant. In this way, offsetting would occur within the borough relatively close to development, as opposed to the offsetting and wildlife benefits being exported outside the borough. Several conditions will also be added to mitigate against further loss of species and sensitive and ecological features. These will require a construction ecological management plan, a landscape and ecological management plan, and details of how the lighting scheme avoids light spill and potential negative effects upon the adjacent woodland and canal, and new habitat buffer zones and suds areas as requested by MBBC Parks. The National Planning Policy Framework sets out that the planning obligations should be considered where otherwise unacceptable development could be made acceptable. However, the MPPF also notes that these obligations should only be sought where they meet all of the following tests: necessary to development, directly related, and fair and reasonable. Planning contributions have been requested from Parks and Countryside, County Highways and County Infrastructure. These amount towards £2,142,500, and this has been agreed by the applicant. It is considered that the proposed development is in accordance with the Borough Plan and the MPPF, and the benefits associated with the proposal. It is recommended to committee to approve the application subject to conditions on the agenda and signing the Section 106 agreement.
Thank you, Darren. Councillor Condacore.
This site extensively at the Borough Plan hearings, and in the Borough Plan EMP1 policy, it clearly says, at actually item 3 right at the top, include a toucan crossing on the Coventry Road and creation within the site a cycle path linking the canal turnover bridge to the Coventry Road. That was mentioned by the officer as a strategic link. It's absolutely vital. And if you look at your map or the diagram there, you see the bottom of the site is the Gypsy Lane. It's going to get more and more traffic. And that particular part of the Gypsy Lane will not have a footpath under these proposals. Unlike the housing development, which will have a footpath and then that will drop you onto the Coventry Canal towpath on the east side, which is the side with a good footpath. The turnover bridge, which is on the top right, thank you, that will actually go over and into the site. So at the moment, there's a very dangerous unlit footpath on the canal towpath on the opposite side, which Mr. Baxter was talking about, which is unlit and you'd fall in the canal if you tried to use it at night. What will actually happen for the strategic link is you'll go across the turnover bridge and then within the site you'll actually go out to the Coventry Road along the top of the site. So this footpath is really important, and yet it's not going to be delivered until the end of the development potentially, which is why I suggested that link from the turnover bridge to the Coventry Road is provided before 20% of the site is occupied, because that is absolutely vital to get that flow. It's been accepted, I think, by everyone. It's a really must-have link. It's in the borough plan as the third item that this site should deliver. And I do ask that the committee make sure that rather than the current planning condition number 24, which says this will be provided when that little bit of the site is being developed, it will actually be provided up front. Because what we find, and we've had this in Camp Hill and in Wellington, some of these conditions that say you will do something at the end of the development means they're actually done really late. And if for any reason things go slow and that last industrial unit by the canal isn't delivered for 10 years or 5 years, then the cycle link isn't delivered, and we have people walking and cycling down the Gypsy Lane. So I'm not asking for anything that the developer doesn't have to provide. What I'm asking for is it's developed up near to the front, so they get a strategic link in, and we avoid people walking and cycling down Gypsy Lane. The other important thing about this internal strategic link is it needs to be lit, and that's why people can't wander through Griff Hollows and along the Canal Towbank path, because we can't light that because of the environmental impact of having street lighting in an environmental wildlife area. The whole idea of going straight across the turnover bridge and then it being within the little green corridor is it keeps the lighting away from the canal.
Thank you, Cation. No, I just have one. I just wanted to clarify, Councillor Condicor, that you've got a copy of the addendum, yeah? And below your comment is the obligation, the creation of a cycle path and a two-gun crossing.
Yeah, the point of
but you said that wasn't there.
Yeah,
no, you're not going to say it. I've just asked you to clarify it.
Yeah.
Adam Weaver.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, councillors. For those who do not know me, I'm Adam Weaver, Estate Manager for Arbury Estate, the applicant. We've been working on securing this site for employment use for the last 11 years and are delighted to bring it to the committee with all the positives it will have for Nuneaton. It's a highly accessible and strategic location which will serve the needs of both Nuneaton and the wider region. The planning application before you and recommended for approval by the officers is in direct response to the adopted borough plan, which allocates Falklands as a strategic employment site under policy EMP1, and the strong market need for employment and land opportunities in this location. The application has received no technical objections and fully accords with the objectives of policy EMP1 of the borough plan. The application is submitted in outline with all matters of detail except access reserved for future consideration. The submitted illustrative master plan demonstrates one way in which the site could be developed. From pages 124 to 125 of the committee report, these explain the economic benefits associated with this proposed development, so I will not repeat these again. But I would like to conclude by reiterating that this is a strategic scale. This is a site of strategic scale and importance. There are good transport links on the regional road system and links to staff and visitors on public transport. It is the site that offers significant social and environmental advantages to the borough. It brings directly nearly 1,700 jobs on site to the borough. I very much hope that you will share with us a positive future for Nuneaton by granting this application.
Clarification. No, Mr. Weaver, could I just ask you to clarify something? Speech. You mentioned about the benefits to Nuneaton. Do you actually mean to Nuneaton and Bedworth as a whole, as a borough? Just thought I'd let. Sophie Lucas.
Good evening all. My name is Sophie Lucas. I'm an Associate Director at Savills and also Planning Agent to the Arbury Estate. I've not much more to add. I fully endorse Mr Weaver's comments, but what I will say is that the provision of new employment opportunities of a strategic scale, close to good public transport links in established and proposed residential areas is a significant social and environmental advantage to employers and employees, enabling short journey to work times. This is important given the large numbers of residents that commute out of the borough each day to work in Coventry, Leicestershire and elsewhere in Warwickshire. Indeed, if existing commuting patterns are used to predict where workers at Falklands would originate, our evidence has shown that at least 70% of the new positions would be taken up by residents of Nuneaton and Bedworth. And I'd also just like to add that recently the government, just this week, updated their own national planning practice guidance, which recognise the importance of the logistics industry in playing a critical role in enabling the efficient, sustainable and effective supply of goods for consumers and businesses, as well as contributing to local employment opportunities. The government recognises that logistics has distinct locational requirements that need to be considered in formulating planning policies, and that these are separate from those relating to general industrial land. And it goes on to state that strategic logistics facilities that serve a national or regional market are likely to require a significant amount of land, good access to the strategic transport network, sufficient power capacity and access to an appropriately skilled local labour, which this site offers. And I've nothing further to add to that.
Okay, thank you. Are there any points of... At the moment, no. In which case, can I, excuse me, to enable debate to take place, move the sorry, have I done something wrong? Is to move the recommendation to grant planning permission subject to a legal agreement, yeah? Mm-hmm. And the conditions printed. Is that seconded? Any member? Councillor Tandy.
Thank you, Chair. I want to see this application being successful because it brings immense opportunities to Nuneaton and Bedworth in relation to jobs and facilities. I do have a concern, though, as a person, like many others I suspect in this room, who will be using the road where the entrance is proposed. I don't have, if I could refer people to page 128, the second paragraph down, where it talks about, and I do appreciate this is an outline planning application, Chair, but it does talk about the modelling and that the core impact of the development is on the operation of the A444 corridor between the Ring Road, blah, blah. I don't need to read it all to you. I don't see a particular problem with traffic that are going from the Ring Road to the M6. I can see a potential difficulty with traffic going in the other direction. I appreciate the signalisation because the traffic is then to come down from the Griff Island and then turn right across the other carriageway, accepting the signalisation. What it doesn't matter. On the opposite side, though, to that entrance is the entrance and exit to the static gypsy caravan site, who will also have traffic going in and out of that site. As I said, I appreciate its outline planning, and I appreciate when it comes back for full planning permission, there will be more detail. But I do have, even at this stage, some serious concerns because we already at peak times have backlogs of traffic backing up sometimes almost up to the Griff Island from going down toward Coton Arches in that direction. So I really want this application to go through, and I just wish we'd have had a little bit, I know we can't, we could have had a little more detail about exactly how the roadworks will work, because we're talking about the Griff Island, which is signalised. We're talking not far away, where you're going to have another junction that's signalised, and the Toucan crossing as well. And I do question whether or not all that put together means that we're going to see some serious hold-ups of traffic round the Griff Island and prior to it. Thank you, Chair.
Fair point with the existing traffic. So I guess the part of your response will be, do you see this actually improving what we've already got now?
That highways is a matter that, and transport is a matter you have to consider tonight's determination of this application alongside the access arrangements, because that is a detailed matter that you're determining tonight. So it is an important question. If I start with the overall impact on the highway network, the applicants undertook strategic transport modelling using the Nuneaton and Bedworth area-wide model, and that highlighted impacts across the network. And we have to basically, in accordance with the National Planning Policy Framework, assess them on their significant impact. And the biggest impact the development was having was on the operation of the A444 corridor, that was then causing traffic to spread out. So the Highway Authority perceived to mitigate the impacts upon the A444 corridor, and we've said the whole corridor because there's a number of impacts along the route, but they're cumulative with other sites that are allocated in the borough plan. So you've got the allocation at Arbury on the other side for the housing, and you've got the housing site down at Woodlands, and the employment site around Walshingham Drive as well. So there's as well as Gypsy Lane. There's a number of developments, and we've had to try and work out what we can get the money for and contribute it for. And we feel that's the corridor that needs the most investment. We've already got contributions working for Bermuda, and Bermuda's got approval through the County Council and will be delivered as well. We're in a really sustainable location as well with the railway station and good bus services. So there's a lot going on, but that's the decision that we've had to make. That's the biggest impact the development's having on that corridor. Regarding to the access arrangements, we've had to go to signalisation because of the sheer amount of movements that the development will generate. But also councillors might remember that there was a significant fatal accident to do with the Gypsy Traveller site not many years ago. And the County Council has sought to try and resolve that issue never happens again at that location. So therefore it's felt signalisation is the best operation really for the best scheme for that location. It resolves the issue that we have with the Gypsy Traveller site, providing them with a dedicated stage to enter and exit, and also deals with the employment site itself. It also provides a buffer for traffic coming down the Coventry Road hitting Griff Island, so it sort of holds them and then platoons them down. So that eases the pressure on the signals, because whatever we do in terms of the access arrangements, Griff Roundabout will be looked at the same time, because it's likely the two will have to be linked to work together alongside the signalisation of the Coventry Road, Gypsy Road signals, which are being funded by the Gypsy Lane site that you approved earlier. So there's a lot going on. We've got a lot of money floating around the place to actually try and improve this area in terms of traffic flow. The Gypsy Lane, Coventry Road signals have been identified for so long with the quarry, but the quarry never implemented them. So we're trying to resolve a lot of problems in that location. So some have been delivered by contribution through Section 106, like the A444 corridor. Others are being delivered by other sites, and then you've got the site delivering its requirements through its Section 278 agreement. So we're actually getting quite a lot from the developers for this site.
Thank you, Ben. That's really useful.
For me, is that when you come in off the Griff Roundabout and you're going to go see you're an HGV and you're going to turn right onto the site, I can't really make it out on this map if there's going to be an extra filter lane to the right, because I do a little bit of lorry driving now and again. I've been a lorry driver for 35 years.
We haven't got
and there's I'm just going back to it's in Warwickshire. It's the access to the Dordon site, and there's one there where you actually approach the junction in the right-hand lane, and what happens is people then hover on the left-hand side lane because they don't really know whether to undertake you, which obviously in the highway code's not really allowed. So I wondered if there is an extra lane there, or could there be an extra lane there to, because if there was a big distribution site there, and I've worked in places where there's been 20-30 trucks waiting to get onto different sites, causing a problem, because if you come off the Griff roundabout, the tendency is for people to kind of race, isn't it, round that corner to try and get in front of people, and then all of a sudden you've got an HGV with not very good lights, because some of them are pretty rubbish. The other thing is to the developer, really, or I know this is outline stuff. The potential is that the houses on Gypsy Lane are going to be approved at some point, and could that be, there's a consideration there, because I've worked in a lot of places where houses and are welcome, obviously, employment, and I think we should approve this tonight with the conditions. But when you start putting big distribution companies next to housing, all of a sudden you get problems. And I worked for a big transport company for a few years as doing health and safety, and it was a never-ending stream of people knocking the door saying, your trucks are disturbing me at night, your trucks are this, your trucks are that. And it got to the point where one of the laws is with driving a truck is you have to test your horn. So 2 o'clock in the morning, everybody's pipping the horn, because we're all on our way out, and the neighbours kept complaining about it. So it would be just a case of, when you're doing your plans, when you're doing your sort of formal plans to where you're going to put the units, can you put them somewhere that position them right, because often they don't get positioned right. I've worked in many places where if they'd have been that way or that way, it would have been better than straight on.
Sorry, Ben, you want
to put the access arrangement up on the screen. As you can see, the drawing, the access does have dedicated right turn lanes for both the Gypsy site for heading southbound and heading northbound into the employment site. It should be noted that Condition 7 also states the specification of what will be required through the technical approval process, which is also tied in with the planning condition to make sure that what is the final scheme, because this is a preliminary drawing, satisfies both planning and the Highway Authority requirements. So it's got to go through a further robust assessment yet under the Highways Act legislation. But the Condition 7 sets out the requirements for that process.
Okay, thank you.
Stage, it would have been extremely helpful had we have had the sort of map that was understandable in the papers, other than the tiny little map that we had. I can understand that. There was absolutely no understanding of what...
With you. Sometimes it's difficult because of how they can reproduce them on the paper. They're not that clear. And we didn't think for some reason that we had that, but Darren's managed to find it, and I think that's been really useful for us to be able to do it. But I will have a word with Catherine and Philip after the meeting to see how we can try and improve some of our visual displays. It won't be any new conversation I've had, I can tell you. Councillor Longdon.
I think my dislike of outline planning permissions is well known. I've never liked them for years and years and years, and I like them even less now. And this particular case in point gives me great problems because of what Sophie said as well about logistics and the government's drive towards logistics. So we're going to add to Shed City, as a lot of people started calling Bermuda now, because that's what it is. And this would be more. And looking at that, if that's the way it's going to be, I'm not too keen, to be honest. And we won't know until such time as we get the full application of what we're going to get. And then it'll be too late because you can't do nothing about it. And the whole thing rankles with me with these outline planning permissions. And if it is a logistics park again, the number of HGVs are going to increase tremendously. And I can understand the problems that people are saying about how you're going to get across these junctions, how you're going to be turning left and right into this thing with HGVs around the place and where they're going. And I don't like it at all. I had hoped that one day we would get to something other than sheds and logistics, but where we are, I suppose it's almost inevitable that we will have some sort of high volume logistics parks but they don't employ a lot of people. You know, they've said 1,700, I think, was a number that was bandied about. It really depends what it is, but most of these big sheds don't employ that many people. They don't need to. And what you do get in some of them is casual labour or very low paid workers on these sites, and it's not right, and it rankles with me, and I'm not happy, so I'm not going to vote for this one. I'm going to vote against this one because I don't know enough about it to be able to make an informed decision, and if people want to keep bringing out line planning permissions, that's fine, but I haven't got any information that would tell me what the benefits are to this borough of that thing, other than the spoken word, and I'm slightly, I think they're looking at it through rose-tinted glasses, and I'm not. I'm looking at it from a more practical point of view, so I'm not going to vote for this because it's not there for me, and I don't see it at all.
Okay, and Councillor Watkins has indicated. Councillor Watkins.
And it's just that I was just waiting for everybody else to get in, really, to be honest. I just want to come out onto the money that's being gave, sort of thing. The one thing that sort of bothers me, really, is when there's lots of money always offered to the extension of the bus service, and what we can actually do to make sure that that actually goes through, because I'll get a bit dubious about that. I mean, there's 200 grand here, and I just want to make sure that we can make sure that that does go towards the bus services, because it says an extension to bus service number 48. 200 grand is a lot of money, I would imagine. Again, because this is only planning outline sort of thing, biodiversity corridors, but that's going to come up at a later stage. And again, it's the ownership of the turnpike, which is at the minute, it's Canal and River Trust. Mm-hmm. So now we've got two developments, one either side, leading to a bridge that is owned by the Canal and River Trust. It's a bit like the troll, really, wouldn't it? It was telling you to get off his bridge. I was wondering, probably to the horror of Ben opposite, but I was wondering if there's any way that Warwickshire County Council could take the ownership of that off Canal and River Trust, or has that conversation been had, or can it be had, or whatever. And the other one would be really, well, for Aubrey, I think you'll know what to build, when to build it, when somebody asks you what they want to put on there. And what the thing for this borough at the minute, for a lot of companies that I know of anyway, is there's not been big enough sheds for them to come into. So I'm sure you'll build whatever when somebody approaches you for it. I mean, a previous company that I worked for had to go to rugby because there was nothing in the borough that was big enough for them. And I've worked in warehousing for many years now, so yeah, good. So if you could just answer them few questions, and I can see Ben's quivering. Okay,
thank a big enough site to have a football stadium. I don't know, but in relation to the 48 bus service, I'm not. You know, there's a amount of money stated out. I don't know how they arrive at that. I'm assuming that it's because the bus will divert into the estate so that workers can get there, and that will have a knock-on effect of the timings of the buses, and they might need more buses. But if like, something different, Ben will tell us, and then also tell us about when the county is going to buy this bridge that's causing all the trouble.
But it's based on our colleagues in public transport work out the additional mileage that would be incurred by the bus going into the site or travelling near to the site, and that's based on the cost, which reduces over a 5-year period, because we try and make it commercially viable. The bus service is commercially viable, and we work with Stagecoach, but the County Council will set the requirements for the service to enable that contribution to be implemented. Regarding the bridge, Warwickshire County Council will not be taking ownership of the bridge, because we could potentially be left liable for its repair and maintenance based on the structure survey that we've seen. And we've also had experiences in other locations, such as Bishopton Lane in Stratford-upon-Avon, where the Canals and Rivers Trust required contributions from the developer to try and improve the bridge and its replacement, which then wanted the Highway Authority to take control of the bridge and repair it. The County Council doesn't have the funds to repair bridges and take on the maintenance liability of that at the moment. We have to put our budgets into the most suitable areas where they require them across the county. So therefore, at the moment, our position is we won't be adopting the bridge. We'll happily work with Canals and Rivers Trust and Nuneaton and Bedworth to provide the footway, cycleway over the top, but obviously the maintenance of the bridge would remain the responsibility of the Canals and Rivers Trust, and that's what the County Council would like to see.
Thank you. Outline applications, because it's one of probably a number of things that annoy this committee to a great degree. And I do remember the days when you used to have an outline application and then that's exactly what it was. But we get indicative drawings with most outlines now, and it's really difficult for when it comes back to us to have that argument about are those things the right size, shape, it in the right location and that, because the applicant's likely to say, well, we put that as an indicative plan at the outline stage. And I tend to, whether I should or not, I don't know, is try to still think of it as an outline, because I've got a number of things about this application. I am in favour of it because overall I can see the benefits of it, for any number of reasons. But we haven't. It was somebody mentioned. It's too late now for me to remember who it was, but mentioned about the height of the buildings and it obscuring the views of the landscape, although the landscape isn't that very good. Well, a lot of people would rather look at the fields and the landscape than some sheds that are on the site. And so, when it comes back to us, I think we do have to take account of the height of the buildings and the design of the buildings and the visual impact it could have, because the geography of the land here means that there will be a visual impact, probably even as far as Marston Lane in Bedworth. If you stand up by the cemetery there and look across over to the quarry and this site beyond, you're way above it. And, the height of the buildings and particularly the design of those buildings and the colours will have a massive role to play in it. And just finally, the cynic in me is about the job guarantees. We've heard this range of, I think, 1,400 to 1,700, something like that. And whilst there's an explanation to how they arrive at those figures, it doesn't always work out. And Bermuda's the prime one. When I think originally when we changed it from the open cast coal there to the industrial estate, we were looking at, I think, at 70% manufacturing on it, and clearly that didn't happen. It's nearly all distribution, or it's a lot of it's retail now, which it wasn't designed to be. So I'm sorry if I'm cynical about the numbers. However, I do hope that they are accurate and they turn out to be accurate if these are approved and then it comes back for detail. But that was just a view I wanted to take on it. I don't think Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Shepherd, I can't. It's really difficult for me to see because of the. No, it's difficult for me to see you indicate because of the position you're sat in.
You trying to sound too small? No. It's a question.
There's Councillor Sargent in the way.
Yeah. It's a question to Ben. You've said about the 106 for the roadways and traffic lights and etc., etc. Can you tell me how much that road improvements are going to cost? Because I get the feeling that the 106 monies are not going to be anywhere near, and how we can guarantee that we get what you're saying we're going to get.
It's on a calculation of the trip based on the trips for the site. But as I said before, where the site's located, there's a number of other allocated sites within the borough plan, such as Arbury, Bedworth Woodlands, Gypsy Lane, and what we've had to do is we've worked out basically the impact of those developments, and when they come along we'll work out those, and they will contribute to the schemes which are all identified in the infrastructure development plan, which underpins the borough plan and has costs associated with all the works there. So that's the basis for them, and we've worked out as a county that we should be able to get sufficient funding. As well as that, the County Council is always proactively looking at other funding options, and we will always try and seek those where we can to bolster developer funding in the future.
If I can just add to that, the contributions that the developer is paying are set out on the table on page 133, together with the amount on the addendum, which is the cost now for the Toucan crossing, which the applicant has agreed to pay as well. So those amounts of money would be in the legal agreement, so that's how we secure those. All the other monies for the other schemes will be secured through the applications for those sites. And it's a bit like a hierarchical thing, as I understand it. There are different things you can do depending on how many of the sites come forward. So if this site comes forward, there'll be a certain amount that they can do to the roundabout, and then the next site means that they can do something else to it. So it's a hierarchical base. There's a slight difference as well in that this application, that's what Councillor Hancock said, is an outline application, and the only thing that's of detail is the access. And because that's all on the highway, I think I'm right in saying it can be done under 278 works. So the developer is still paying for that, but it doesn't need to be in the legal agreement because it's all part of the highway. So that's why that's not in the agreement.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Shepherd, you wanted to come back in, and then I'm going to move on then.
If you don't mind.
I think for all the schemes along the...
Councillor Shepherd is going.
I suppose if I can give you an example of Griff Island, I think it's in the range of £2 million for the junction improvements on that. So along the corridor, we're looking well around between 15 to 20 million pounds worth of improvements. But obviously, we are bound by the seal regulations provided by the government.
Right, thanks. That's a really good debate. It's been moved and seconded, the recommendation to grant planning permission subject to the legal agreement and the conditions printed. All those in favour of that? And against?
1, 2, 3.
That's it then. No abstentions. Okay, thank you. That's approved then. If we can move back to item number 7, please. Sorry?
Say thank you to Ben.
Oh, yeah, thank you very much, Ben.
This application is for 13 flats and includes vehicle access. It is proposed that a 3-storey building will adjoin the British Queen, whilst the pub element is to be converted with extensions to be added to the rear of the pub. The application is a resubmission following the previous approval for 12 flats on the same site. The application site is located on a busy highway known as King Street, east of Bedworth Town Centre. The British Queen pub is a 2-storey gabled roofed building situated right on the corner of King Street and King's Garden. The pub is now vacant and has been for quite some time. Consequently, the beer garden is now overgrown with trees and vegetation. The proposed development site will front onto King Street, and vehicular access to the site will be from King's Gardens. To the north of the site is number 2 King's Garden. To the west, on the other side of King's Gardens, are the semi-detached properties of 82 and 82A King Street. And to the east of the site is the former King Street Cinema, followed by a small row of terraces. The application is being reported to committee at the request of Councillor Pandey. The key issues are the principle of development, impact on residential amenity, the impact on visual amenity, highway safety and parking, and planning obligations. The proposed development of 13 flats constitutes development on previously developed land and is considered to be an appropriate and sustainable use of land within the urban area. The surrounding area has a good deal of residential uses and a scattering of commercial uses. Indeed, the town centre is only a few hundred metres away to the east. This brings added benefits for a more sustainable way of living due to the shorter walking distances to shops, services and facilities, and increased convenience to access sustainable modes of transport to the rest of the borough and further afield. Moreover, the application site has been previously approved for residential use in 2015 and 2018. The earliest of these permissions were for 28 dwellings and has since expired without being implemented, whilst the second is still extant. Taking the above into consideration, the principle of residential development on the site is both suitable and well established. With regards to impact on residential amenity, policy BE3 of the Borough Plan states that all development proposals must contribute to local distinctiveness and character and have regard to residential amenity. This policy is further supported by the Council's Residential Design Guide, paragraph 9 of which provides clear guidance on how buildings should relate to each other with regards to levels of acceptable amenity for both existing and future occupiers. With regards to impact on 2 King's Garden, situated over here, this is a 2-storey end of terrace property which is immediately to the north of the proposed development. It has a single-storey side extension and a single-storey extension to the rear. The house at 2 Gardens has a habitable room at ground floor to the front, but a 45-degree line drawn from the centre of this front window is not breached by the proposal. The large 3-storey section of the proposed flats is well over the prescribed 7-metre separation distance from 2 Gardens, 2 King's Gardens, private garden area, and no habitable room windows are overlooked. With regards to 87A King Street, this building this building is almost directly facing this space here. Number 87 King Street is a flat above Bargain Booze on the other side of King Street from the proposed development. It has a habitable window fronting King Street facing the proposal. The window currently faces on the gable end of the former Picture House Theatre. Here. The window to the flat above 87 King Street will be at a slight angle to the 3-storey element of the proposal. The separation distance is 17 metres from the proposed windows in the apartments and the window in the flat. Moreover, the distance is across a public road where the guidance states that distances can be relaxed. The separation distance of 17 metres, therefore, is considered to be acceptable to protect the privacy of this window. It is therefore considered that there would be no unacceptable impact on the privacy to the first floor habitable window of 87 King Street. With regards to the impact on 82A King Street, this building over here. This is a semi-detached property which fronts onto King Street and is on the corner of the entrance to King's Gardens. The side of the house at 82A will be side on to proposed apartments within the converted public house. There are no side-facing windows which are affected by the proposal. The rear private garden of 82A King Street runs parallel to the road of King's Garden. The residential design guide sets out a 7-metre distance standard from the first floor windows to the private amenity space and the windows of the proposal of the proposed windows are 90 metres away from the nearest boundary of the rear garden. Besides, it is across a public highway where there, as I said earlier, there is greater flexibility regarding distances. It is therefore considered that the proposal is acceptable in terms of the impact of the residential amenity of neighbouring properties. It is also considered acceptable within the development itself. With regards to the impact on visual amenity, the corner element of the pub will not change visually, and it is intended that the extension to the side facing onto King Street will blend in with the existing pub. A condition will be added to ensure that the materials are of a high quality and mimic those in the main building. The ridge line of the proposed extension to create the flats will be around 2 metres higher than the ridge of the pub. Although this is higher than the pub, it will be more prominent. This rise, the rise in heights, will serve as a visual transition from the lower pub on the corner to the large buildings further along. The three-storey element, which fronts onto King Street, has been designed to look like an older building. It has large windows which line up vertically, and although slightly generic looking, should blend acceptably with the street scene. Overall, it is considered that the proposal complies with design guidance in the Residential Design Guide, and that although the development is large, this massing is not considered to be significantly detrimental to the visual amenity of the area. With regards to parking and highway safety, Warwickshire County Council object to the scheme on the basis of insufficient car parking. In regarding to the parking provision, however, the applicant is proposing a total of 17 off-road car parking spaces for the 13 proposed flats. This would consequently equate to roughly 1.3 spaces per dwelling, which would be in accordance with the Council's traditional maximum parking standards, which now carry only minimal weight. The site is very close to the town centre, the railway station, and other shops, amenities and places of work, so it is considered that the proposal would be in a sustainable location and that the parking is sufficient. It is therefore considered that car parking provision is adequate and would not be significantly detrimental to highway safety. With reference to planning obligations, the MPTF states that obligations should only be sought where they meet all the following tests. As stated earlier, necessary to the development, directly related to development, and fair and reasonable. Planning contributions have been requested by Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council's Parks Country team and Sports Development team. The applicant, however, has provided a financial viability assessment which demonstrates that the scheme cannot viably support any contributions. This has been verified independently by the Evaluations Office. It is therefore accepted that the scheme does not need to provide any planning obligations and that it is compliant with Policy SH1 of the Borough Plan and National Guidance. Since the proposal accords with the Borough Plan and there are no material reasons to refuse the application, it is recommended to committee to approve the application subject to conditions on the agenda.
Thank you, Darren. To enable debate to take place, can I move the recommendation which is grant planning permission subject to the conditions printed? Is that seconded? Thank you. Any member?
Yeah.
Councillor Watkins?
Just really nothing to go any further, but I see that there was granted 12 flats before, but they managed to squeeze another flat in to get 13, but they wouldn't have squeezed another 14 to get into the 14, so that they would have had to give us some money to parks and amenities. It just amazes me how they managed to keep everything on the borderline. and then never want to give us anything to keep the residents happy. So it's just a comment really on that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor.
I pass this site on an extremely regular basis, and I was hoping that the 12 flats would have been on the way by now. I'm very disappointed that they've come back with this, and we still get no 106 money on it. That said, this site is desperate to be developed. We need the housing. It's close to Bedworth town centre. It's close to the railway station, and I just wish they'd get on with it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think it's noticeable that there's no residents from King's Gardens objected. There was a number of objections originally. I think they've maybe been worn out by the ongoing thing. Clearly, when there's a permission given, we can't force people to do it. But it's a main road into Bedworth. I'm pleased that the actual pub is being kept, and I'm pleased that the frontage of the proposed flats has got sills and lintels to kind of match the frontage of the existing pub. But at the moment, it's a derelict eyesore and a disgrace to Bedworth. And I don't know whether we could put a note on the application if it's approved, to urge the owners to get on and get it done, because I think the people that particularly live around there anyway, and those that commute, if that's the right word, along there, they just want that site tidying up. And while I'm at it, perhaps we can do the same for the corner pin site just up the road. Right, okay. I don't see anybody else, so it has been moved. Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Llewellyn-Nash.
I totally agree with you. This has been an eyesore for far too long, and it was. I think it was one of my first planning meetings actually that this came up. I'm just wondering, if there was a car parking issue, would it be silly to say go back to the original 12 rather than 13?
Well, we can only
Can't do that.
We can only deal with the application in front of us.
Now.
If you wanted to do that, you'd have to refuse this or defer
okay.
it. That's the.
Okay.
All I would say on that is that there is free car parking at the railway station. Park.
Yeah, there is.
Really, that's used in the day by people in the town to save paying car parking fees, and of an evening by people that live in the cottages that don't have any parking. Sure. So that's tight. Yeah. Anyway, I think for me it's to try and encourage people, because they stand your doorstep. So the sustainability thing should encourage people to. I'm not convinced by it all, but it should encourage people if they haven't got cars to live somewhere like that. Anyway, the recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to the conditions. All those in favour of that? Okay, that's unanimous. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, and against? And abstentions? Okay, so on to our last application of the evening. Item number 9. The Limes, Bedworth.
This is 18 and 19 The Limes, Bedworth. This application is to remove 2 oak trees referred to as T24 and T25 of Tree Preservation Order 5/92 at 18 and 19 The Limes, Bedworth. The 2 trees are located at the rear of number 18 and 19 The Limes and are visible from the street and open space located off Silver Birch Avenue. The applicant states that both trees are considered to be responsible for root-induced subsidence damage to the 19 The Limes. This application has been reported to committee due to the number of objections received. The oak trees were given TPO status on account of their condition and potential amenity value and the contribution they make to the character and appearance in the street scene. The trees can be seen from Silver Silver Birch Avenue and therefore will offer some significance to public views. However, the applicant has stated that they are willing to plant replacement trees of standard sizes. The species suggested are hornbeam or field maple. Justification to remove the oak trees. The applicant has submitted an arboricultural report which states that both trees are at fault for the subsidence to the house. Crawford Insurance, who have assessed the subsidence and arranged for the arboricultural report, state that the tree management works are required and it will be necessary to stabilise the rear and right-hand flank of the wall, the cost of which is expected to be in the region of roughly £3,000. If tree management is not carried out, it may be necessary to introduce partial underpinning and alternative accommodation, the cost of which is expected to be in the region of £30,000. The Council's tree officer was consulted as part of this application and agrees with the findings of the report. The tree officer also concluded that the replacement of the trees with a hornbeam would be acceptable. In light of the above, it is recommended to committee to grant permission to fell both oak trees, subject to being replaced with 2 hornbeam species. It should, however, be noted that the applicant will need the consent of the owners at number 18 The Limes to have the oak tree removed. Thank you.
Thank you, Darren. Okay, to enable debate to take place, can I move the recommendation to grant the tree works for the reasons printed? Is that seconded? Any member? Councillor Watkins?
Myself speaking in favour of trees here, so I'm a bit shocked on this one. But I'm sure them trees would have been there before them houses. And I've seen this on quite a few occasions now where we've granted planning permission, we've built some houses, people have moaned about the trees that they've moved in next to, and so we've had to cut the trees down. Well, like I say, the trees were there before, and the occupants of these houses must have knew that, so a bit surprised on that. I'm a bit surprised on our tree officer as well, because usually we've got it in our policy where we don't cut healthy trees down, so a bit surprised by that one. The other is the replacement of the trees. They're going to replace it with some hornbeams or something. Where they're going to replace it with the hornbeams? What they're putting it back in their garden, or they're putting it in a local park? There's a bit of detail missing for me, Chair. There's not much really said there, and I'm not really in favour of this one tonight. Thanks.
Councillor Watkins on this one. Like he's already said, the tree was there long before the housing development. My other concern is that it's only one house that's being affected, and it's not the house that the tree belongs to. So there's an issue there. You'd think both properties would be affected by the subsidence. Also, if you start cutting down a very mature oak like this one, you're going to be left with a gaping great hole in the ground, which is going to cause even more subsidence because you've got to take the trunk out. And as we know, the roots of a tree far exceed the height of a tree. So there's an issue there. And like Councillor Watkins said, you know, replacing like for like, where are you actually going to plant them if there's a gaping great hole? And what are the people going to do? Because that's going to cause more subsidence on their property. So they've got a really big issue here.
Yeah, I mean, in regards to whether the tree was there before the properties, I don't know unless anybody else knows. All I can say is I worked on those houses when they were built over 45 years ago. You know, so I mean, I don't know whether that tree was there or not. And, you know, I'm not a tree expert, but I do know that roots of trees, it's depending on the type of tree, whether the roots go deep or whether they go almost horizontal. And like I say, I'm not an expert on it, but to me there appears to be a degree of evidence in here that's showing that the damage is being caused. Any other...
Could I just add something?
Yes, Catherine.
Generally speaking, as officers, we would support both Councillor Watkins and Llewellyn Nash's views. And Councillor Hancock's will remember, and some other members may as well. We had a similar situation with the tree on Golf Drive, where you're right, the trees were there before the houses, and that's why the tree preservation order was put on. And very similar on Golf Drive, on the corner of Golf Drive and Meadowside, where there was a very large tree in the front garden, which was only affecting the front garden wall. It wasn't the house, it was the front garden wall. Quite rightly, at that time, we recommended that that tree was not allowed to be felled, and committee went along with that decision. The applicant appealed, and not only did she win the appeal, but she won compensation against us for refusing the application. So, whilst I would normally agree with you, particularly where the trees were there before the houses, if there is evidence that it is causing subsidence to a property, then it is likely that that application would be approved if it went to appeal.
Okay, thanks, Catherine. Okay, the recommendation has been moved and seconded to grant the tree works for the reasons printed. All those in favour of that? 8. And against? And abstentions? Okay, that's approved. That concludes all the business. I don't have any urgent items. Can I thank you very much for your attendance and declare the meeting closed? I think there's been some particularly useful debates on the items tonight.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Yep, thanks, Philip. Oh, you didn't put me...
No, this is